session, members. This meeting will be recorded and then uploaded onto the Assembly website. So apologies, we received one from Jonathan Buckley, and Diana Armstrong will be late. Declarations of interest, members, if any. None. We then move to chairperson's business. Just one item, members. 25-26 budget. So members will be aware that the executive issued a draft budget for consultation before Christmas, and the department has provided its January monitoring round submission of page 604. The committee may wish then to write to the department to seek a briefing when the January monitoring round is complete on how the 24-25 departmental budget will finish in respect of the 25-26 budget allocation. Are members content? Yep. Okay, draft minutes, members, are at page 7 of our packs. Are members content that they're a true and accurate reflection of our deliberations in December? Content? Okay.
Is that agreed, members?
Yeah. Matters arising. Are there any items that members wish to raise at this stage that will not be covered later?
Yep.
None? Okay, we'll then move to item 6, which is the Magee Expansion Taskforce final report and action plan. We're delighted to have the chair of the task force, Mr. Stephen Kelly, who will be known to many members. I invite you forward, Stephen. How are you, Stephen? It's good to have you. And we have Linda McGuinness, who is the Department Director responsible for the task force also. So, members, there are a number of items included in your pack. At page 29 is the final report. Page 153 is the terms of reference. 157 is the departmental correspondence. And the city and growth daily progress reports at page 172. On behalf of the committee, can I welcome you, Stephen, and firstly thank you on behalf of the committee for all your work as chair of the task force and the important work that you have been engaged in. And Linda, you're very welcome as well. And at this stage, Stephen, I'm very happy to hand over to you.
Chair, good morning, and particularly good morning for the efforts that people have made to make it this far as well, given the conditions. I came back from Aldergrove on Monday night. It was a pretty horrendous journey, to say the least, so I can only imagine what it's been like this morning for yourself, Chair, and colleagues in the committee and the officials that are here to support you. I'll maybe just take 5 minutes, Chair, just to make sure everybody's on the same page. So you do have our terms of reference, and it makes clear in the terms of reference that the task force has been established because the executive, as part of NDNA, were asked to bring forward proposals to develop the expansion of Ulster University's campus at Magee College, including the necessary increase to maximum student numbers to realise the 10,000 student campus target and a graduate entry medical school. And that has been the basis on which we have been undertaking our work since our first meeting in April of last year. The terms of reference then goes on to talk about us identifying the necessary resources, the challenges that are required to overcome in terms of attractiveness and experience, to ensure that the plan that we bring forward is aligned to ensure maximised social and economic benefit, to look at whatever barriers there are to that delivery, whatever constraints there may be in place, whether that be planning, whether that be issues around engagement with local community, excuse me, etc., etc., etc. And we've gone about our work on a co-design process, so the task force itself is made up of people from the academic community, of course, but also government, business, the community sector, trade unionists, as well as cross-border involvement through the Irish government and ATU in Letterkenny. But we've added to that expertise that we originally had brought on board for the task force by including additional expertise in town planning, academic and health workforce planning as well. And our role is to be independent, objective and transparent, which is why it's really good that we're here today with the committee and presenting the plan to yourselves. There's various, over the last 60 years, there's various campaigns, etc., around university provision in the city, but we're really clear that we're meeting a practical challenge. The challenges that have been made over the last number of years and continue to this day are important, of course they are, but ours is a practical job, and the report that's been presented and the action plan that's been presented to you and the Minister is that practical plan which we've been asked to address. As I said previously to the committee, we began our process by going back and looking at why things have not happened in the past? Why has there been failure or not full delivery? And we've attempted to address those challenges in our action plan. But in addition to that, we're trying to make sure that we make this stick. And it's a phrase I continue to use through our work as a task force, but also when we talk about this piece of work publicly. So what happens, because this is a long-term development plan, what happens across multiple assemblies, across multiple ministries, across multiple years to ensure that this delivery is finally put in place. And we presented that in terms of a number of areas. So we know now that NDNA commitment, which was an agreement between the British and Irish governments, is now an executive-wide commitment in terms of the programme for government. We have this included in the draft investment strategy for Northern Ireland. It's in the departmental plan, it's in the departmental budget, and those and other areas ensure that this project will be delivered upon, as is the request of the Minister and ultimately the Executive as well. In our report, we also provide an analysis excuse me, from KPMG, which looks at what the capital and the resource requirement would be over a number of years and how that money would be returned to the Northern Ireland pot, so to speak. And the good news on that is that by 2029, all the money that's required to actually be spent to expand this campus and to have those student numbers will be fully recovered by the Northern Ireland economy by 2029. So full 3 years ahead of when some of the investments themselves will actually have to be made. And in addition to that, there's a recurring economic benefit of more than £250 million per year, positive benefit to the Northern Ireland economy. In terms of the investment required, it's about £262 million for the capital infrastructure. In addition to that, there's about £29 million for that project management office cost and PhDs, which are capitalised in terms of the budget, and about £52 million in enabling costs. And those enabling costs are about widening participation, about the marketing of the campus and the city as a result. And then, in addition to that, there is a rising number of students on campus, and as a result, a rising requirement in terms of funding those student places. And that goes from £2.5 million in the current financial year to £35.4 million in 2032-2033, and thereafter it's £38 million per year. We asked the Minister and ministers across the Executive in our interim report. We gave a series of asks, almost 30 asks in total. And one of those was the reason for those was to provide us with the clarity, but also the precision that the plan that we would be developing and presenting would be meeting what their plans and expectations actually were. And one of those key questions was, would the student numbers be taken from other campuses, or whether this would be additional students? And the decision has been that the 10,000 number would be met by providing local students with the opportunity to study at home rather than actually shifting students from other campuses. So this isn't about taking people out of Belfast and dropping them into Derry. This isn't about reducing the offer that's available either at Queen's University Belfast, Ulster University or other university campuses in the east of the province, or indeed from Coleraine. But this is about actually providing those people who feel that they've no choice but to travel across the GB or across the border to actually have the opportunity to study at home. And it meets a growing demographic that out to 2029, there's a peak in terms of the number of students or number of people who would be of university age. And I think that's a good decision. I think it's a decision to provide the opportunity for people at home to study at home, to provide an opportunity for those young people to remain here in Northern Ireland and contribute to the local economy. Because we know that when those people leave and they go to institutions across the water or down south, they may choose not to come home again. So it's about holding on to those people that we best possibly can. Chairman, in your pack you'll have the report, and it's got a full detailed timeline in terms of when we expect the capital infrastructure to be in place. The timeline includes Alongside that, the budget that's required both for capital and recurring revenue expenditure across those years. And then in addition to that, there's a layer above that which actually shows the student numbers as they rise, as the capital facilities become available, and as those student places become available. One of the most pleasing elements of this is that there's been a huge piece of academic work done, academic planning work done by Ulster University themselves. They've looked at all the evidence that they have in terms of applications. They see where the demand is currently, and they're forecasting where demand will be in the future in terms of particular programmes. And what it will mean is that out to 2032, there will be an additional more than 50 additional courses being provided on this campus for students, and that's across all four faculties of the university. So in life and health sciences, it's everything from sport, and just yesterday the university began advertising a new BSc in sport here on this campus. Sports psychology, clinical decision making, healthcare policy, public health, global health, etc., etc., etc. In the Ulster Business School, there's a new business studies programme which provides an additional 6 pathways. So that pathway could be in accountancy, or it could be in marketing, or it could be in human resources, etc., etc., etc. But there's new programmes in there as well in terms of financial technology management, etc., etc., etc. In arts and humanities, there's going to be the reintroduction of liberal arts, but politics, public relations, fashion design, performing arts, virtual production, special effects, etc., etc., etc. And in the computing, engineering and built environment faculty, there's going to be additional programmes in computing with gaming, regulatory technology, which is a particular sweet spot for the Northwest economy, design with technology, housing and quantity surveying, cybersecurity, etc., etc., etc. So what you're beginning to see here is that this isn't just building a number of buildings and providing funding for student places, but they're actually more than 50 additional undergraduate and postgraduate courses that meet the needs and demands that we've heard from the local business community, from the local community and voluntary sector, that also meet the needs and demands of the young people who want to come and study at university and are choosing currently because of no choice to travel across the border for that education. We also have a section in our report about ensuring delivery. So there's quite an extensive paper supported by the Strategic Investment Board around governance. That's about how we properly manage public money and public projects here in Northern Ireland. It's not the top table, but it's the people who are ensuring that the executives' needs and objectives are met, that the ministers' needs and objectives are met, and that they're managing public money in a prudent and sensible way. What you'll see, Chair, at the end of this process, and hopefully by 2032, with all things going well, will be a physically changed city, because the infrastructure, including public realm, in this part of the city will have changed. We'll have a better educated, more creative and more innovative region. We'll have a wealthier place, but we'll also have a healthier place. And we heard very compelling evidence from the Chief Executive, the Medical Director and the Head of HR for the Western Trust, that actually their relationship as it currently stands with this campus has meant that they have now a sustainable workforce in the health services. This year is the first year that they won't have agency workers on the nursing side as a result of the work that's been going on with Ulster University on this campus. And we will see that the provision of a workforce for the Western Trust, but also for across Northern Ireland, being delivered through the additional programmes and additional places that are going to be created here in this campus. This is a difficult, complex, expensive project. It's going to take place over a number of years, but the action plan demonstrates and provides evidence alongside it that there is a necessity and there is a viability in terms of the plan, and we hope that the objective will be delayed no longer. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for that. I know you and the task force have dedicated a huge amount of time and effort into producing such a comprehensive report, so can I thank you for that. If I could just start, Stephen, in terms of the work of the task force, you obviously had a preset ministerial requirement in terms and wider commitment in terms of the 10,000 student number. That was something that had been set in NDNA. If the task force had have been starting with a blank sheet in terms of our objective is to grow and sustain this campus, do you think the task force would have selected the figure of 10,000 students?
The ambition is beyond 10,000, Chair.
Okay.
The 10,000 is a very helpful number in terms of what has already been politically agreed. So that provides us with the opportunity to have a target point in terms of our work. What you'll find at the end of this process is that the ambitions of the city and the region and for Northern Ireland won't be constrained by that 10,000 number. The work that we're doing is about ensuring that the right programmes and the infrastructure is in place, absolutely. But it's also about the attractiveness of this campus, the attractiveness of staying in Northern Ireland and studying, the attractiveness of young people to get educated on programmes that are needed for a sustainable economy, a sustainable health service, a sustainable community, culturally, politically, etc., etc., etc. So the ambition is not constrained by 10,000, but it's helpful for us, as is in any project, to have an end date and a target number, and as a result of that, working back in terms of what the programme is required to get to that point.
And how confident is the task force that by 2032 that 10,000 number will be achieved and then sustainable in the long term?
We're confident that it can be achieved. It's challenging, there's no doubt about that. I think you'll have an evidence later from Ulster University themselves, and I'm sure they can talk about the level of challenge that's been placed on them by us as a task force. We've had many engagements, including this, mostly in this very room that we're in today. There's been an acceptance of some things and not accepting other things, and we've put we've put pressure on the university to move faster in some areas. Just the process of committing to the Minister that we will have a report to him by December was hugely challenging for the university in terms of that academic planning piece alone. And in terms of actually delivering a report, as Linda will know, and the small team, some of which are here with us today, will tell you, we worked 18 hours a day, 7 days a week for the last number of weeks. Not just the people from the department, ourselves as task force members, but also the university themselves, to ensure that that objective, that time, that deadline that we had set for ourselves was actually met. So deadlines are important. It's put additional pressure on the university to perhaps escalate the pace at which they would have ordinarily done things around that academic planning piece. It's meant that we've been able to secure, and there's been news already, some additional land not far from the campus in order to meet that objective as well. So we're confident, but it's challenging. Major building projects are difficult. Northern Ireland hasn't got a brilliant record at delivering those on time and on budget, but we've tried to learn from, which is why we've had the involvement of the Strategic Investment Board, try to learn from the mistakes that have happened before and put in place structures, including that governance structure, to ensure that that delivery will happen by that date.
And just picking up on the constraining, so the commentary from the university has been that in order to meet that target, they would be required to constrain the number of undergraduate places available at the Belfast campus in order to grow the numbers here. So we just wanted to pick up on the line that you used earlier in terms of it wasn't about constraining or impacting upon any other campus, but the university have been clear that they would have to limit the number of places that are available currently in the Belfast campus in order to see the growth here. So do you see any impact of the growth of this campus on the Belfast campus?
Sure. Well, the university can explain that process. It's part science, part art, part magic. I'm not quite sure how they overcome all of those at the one time. But essentially what they're saying is that they have been able to use Mazin and the fact that there is a Mazin constraint in order to move additional people. So it's not about reducing the numbers in Belfast. It's actually about providing more opportunity through the Mazen process to move people under that process to the campus. So they're making offers here where their demand is exceeding the supply, making additional offers to move people to this campus. But the university will be able to explain that process better than I can, Chair.
Fair enough. And then just two final questions from me, Stephen. So obviously the task force continues in place. What do you envisage the role of the task force now moving forward after you get some rest?
Well, we've had rest. We're 10 minutes back at the beginning of December some point. Our role is, in many ways, continues as it is. I mean, we had an objective to produce 2 reports in a very short period in time, which we've done. Our role now is to ensure that the plan that we've laid out is actually being delivered. So there's if members of the committee who have a very important scrutiny role have a moment to actually consider whether the commitment is actually there, it's coming really quickly. So the department have a budget. We've established what we require in terms of delivery for the incoming year. So that moment is on us really, really quickly. So we'll be meeting again next month, and we'll be meeting again throughout this year. And our role is to partly observe what's happening, but also ensure that the delivery of the plan that we've established is being delivered by the Minister and by the department themselves. In addition to that, we have a responsibility to overcome whatever challenges and to support the department, the university and others to overcome whatever challenges are there. There's a lot of commentary around NI Water, for instance. We invited both the Economy Minister and the department to come and give evidence to us, which they have done. And we invited NI Water and had their participation as well. At this point in time, for what they have visibility of, they don't believe that water will be a constraint to this process. But that has not been tested. That has not been validated. And our role as a task force is to ensure that that happens. They have a really clear process themselves in terms of pre-engagement with potential developers, ensuring that they have really early sight and visibility of projects that may be coming along. Our role is to work with people who are not involved in this project, so it could be private sector or others, to ensure that they understand that process as well. And events happen, Chair. Things change. Weather impacts us on a daily basis. And what we're trying to do is look out to an 8-year period here. And between now and then, there will be opportunities that come along that we need to potentially grasp that may escalate the pace of some of this. Or there may be obstacles that are identified that we need to work to try to help overcome. And that could be simple engagement, or that could be that there's a requirement of other departments within the executive to provide some support. And our role as a task force is to ensure that that happens.
And then just finally, Stephen, and I'll come to you in 1 second if that's okay. In terms of media reports suggest that we may have political change in the Department for the Economy, does the task force have any concern that that will impact on the momentum and drive to deliver this target?
I got a call from the Minister the morning of that news coming out, and he was very keen to ensure that I was reassured that whilst there may be a change in Minister, that actually the process, because this is now a programme for government commitment, the process will continue on. We've presented a costed timeline plan, which he is very pleased with. That plan will be presented to the executive, as was the interim report was presented to the executive back at the beginning of December, I understand. And that's back to my point earlier about making this stick. You'll see in our document that we do have a risk register, and we talk about the potential for ministerial change or change of objectives or change of emphasis or whatever. So we've been dealing with those as we've gone along. We would be content at this point in time, but it's unsettling. Ministers are important. I don't need to tell people around this table that ministers really provide the drive and the precision that's required within the departments to ensure that not just the resources, but the effort is made throughout the department to ensure that delivery. We've had a very good minister in terms of this project so far, and anything that we've required, any political direction, any emphasis that's required within the department to ensure that this work has been done, has been delivered for us. we would be confident that that would continue because this is a programme for government commitment.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Linda.
You're okay. Thank you, Chair. I was just going to come in on back of the comment around how are we going to manage and what's the role of the task force and that going forward. We actually spent quite a bit of time looking at that as a department about how do we support the role of the task force. In the governance report that Stephen had referred to earlier, there is a full section around the transition, that I would call, of the task force from getting the initial document. We are now moving into a delivery phase, so which we've already started. Obviously, we've engaged Strategic Investment Board again to work with us on the programme business case, which has actually started already for the delivery of this project. And we're hoping to have that obviously with us by April this year. And the programme business case obviously then will be overseen by a programme board. But above the programme board is a steering group. And the steering group will have the members of the task force. And as Stephen said, the role of when the Minister set up the task force, the terms of reference clearly sets out the role of what it will be going forward, which will be to monitor and to oversee the actions that the plan will actually deliver in the next 8 years. So all of the task force, there will be a transitioning, and we've already started work on that actually this week as well, about moving that, putting that arrangements and that in place. So there is a very strong governance framework now to support with the task force and that going forward. So it's just to give the committee today that assurance that some of that thinking has already taken place, and we'll hopefully have that in place by April going forward.
Chair, can I maybe add just something to that? So the programme level business case is a really important document. So I've been in and around government for the last 16 years. Chief Executive of the City Centre here, as well as the job I currently have with manufacturing NI. But getting right into the middle of it in terms of this project, you begin to understand the processes that were required to spend public money are horrendous, to say the least. The amount of effort that's required to spend money is quite extreme for an outsider to look in from outside. If we were trying to do this in every single project and every single programme, every single time, we would be here until not 2032 but 2232 probably in order to get that done. So the approach that we've taken here is we're building the bulk of what that business case process would require in advance, so that every individual project already has 50-60% of that work already done, and the bit that's added on the top is project specific to each individual project. So that programme level business case is a really important document that will escalate the pace of delivery on this. Because there are multiple projects, there's 9 construction projects, some of which are refurbishment, some of which are public realm, across this programme. But that programme level business case will also support what Derry City Council, Derry City and Strabane District Council are doing in terms of City Deal projects, support what Northwest Regional College may be planning in terms of its capital estate going forward, etc., etc., etc. So we're providing products here that will escalate the pace and provide the clarity and certainty and the precision that the department needs and others in order to help release that public money as we go through this process.
Perfect. And then, Linda, just in terms of spending of public money, the budget this year, there was an underspend in the Magee Expansion, is that correct?
So there is, at the moment, there's a £2 million proposed underspend, but there might not be by the end of the year. We have another project that is on the table at the moment for consideration, Chair. So that budget actually may be spent. But as Stephen has referred to, we obviously need to make sure we go through the right processes to make sure that that money is spent in the right way, which we will obviously do as we have done with the expenditure to date. But the budget was committed actually just in February, March last year. And we have been able to secure £12 million. So in the absence of a programme business case, we have been going through a very detailed process around actually ensuring that we can spend the public money that has been assigned to this project. And as you know, capital projects are notoriously difficult to commit in year. But we are doing that, and actually we have an opportunity which has just arisen on Monday of this week to look at potentially another piece of expenditure of the plan that's in the plan. It's not something new, but it's something that we can perhaps fast forward, and we are looking at that with a view of trying to expend all of that money in year.
And how does the draft budget published just before Christmas for the department align with the requirements of the expansion plan in the forthcoming financial year?
So it is a challenge. As most of you know, there's obviously not enough public money to do all of the activities and priorities that we want to do. The Minister's categorically very clear in this. This is one of his number one priorities within the department, and the view in terms of the existing budget that we have this year, we'd just over 4 million of revenue expenditure and the capital expenditures we've committed. He's very clear with the budget that's been set for next year, which is just under 20 million, is something that we will be bidding for and will be a priority for the department, for the Minister going forward.
Bidding for, you mean in terms of addition? So this is the draft budget has been published. So you mean bidding for additional funding?
Yes.
Okay. So that means the current funding that has been allocated in the draft budget isn't there to meet the requirements of the budget this year that have been produced within the report?
Not at the moment, but it's very clear. The Minister's very clear in this. We're obviously going into a one-year budget, and the Minister's very clear that this is his number one priority and something that he wants to see funded. It's not something that's in our baseline budget at the moment, but neither was it this year. So the view of us that we will be bidding for in this next year. The Minister's also very clear that in the next 3-year budget, which will follow this year, that the priorities and the costs that have been outlaid in the report will be a priority and will be, as officials, being asked to bid for.
Perfect. Sinead.
Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation, and thanks for the work that you've done. It's very impressive and it's very comprehensive, and it's a pathway. I suppose if I articulate the concerns of my constituents, there's been many a slip between the cup and the lip in terms of delivery for this campus, and people are concerned about the delivery of the plan. The plan looks good and it covers all aspects. It covers the infrastructure, the capital expenditure, and the academic offering as well, and the ongoing resource required. And it also deals with the economic impact and the dividends to the city and to the region. So I think it's the right thing to do. It has to be done for the city, but there is concerns about delivery and oversight. So you have dealt with some of the risks and the challenges, and you've also indicated, the governance with SIB. But what happens if you're not meeting the deadlines? What springs into action, and how do you continue to inform the people of Derry how this project is moving forward? Because that is the main concern, because we've had many plans before, and either government has let us down here in the last 20 years, or the university itself has let us down, and other priorities have taken place, and the ring fencing that we need hasn't been there. And we even have seen now, since the 16th of December to today, like there is a potential for the Minister moving off, and whilst it's the ministerial priority, as Linda has said, and that he's not going to be here potentially to oversee that prioritisation that he's given this. So even at this very early stages, without it being absolutely totally adopted, this plan by the executive, we're running into difficulties in terms of that leadership and oversight for delivery. So what happens if deadlines are not met?
So I think the first thing to say is there hasn't been a plan before. There's been many reports making the case for why to do this, but none about how. Very first job, and I reported this to the committee before, very first job I did as chair was actually reach out to everybody and say, send me anything that's ever been written that looks like a plan for the delivery of the numbers of this campus, and none of it's ever been done. The closest that there was in 2017. It was a piece of work that was done funded by Derry City Council, that looked at the need to expand Mazin. Outside of that, there hasn't actually been a plan that actually had the physical infrastructure that's required, the timeline in terms of when those things should be delivered, the academic plan that will go alongside it, and how you manage the public money through that process. So this is the first time there's actually been a plan. Second thing is, and it's the reason why I flagged in my opening remarks about if there's a moment to actually look at whether delivery is intended or not. It's the budget that appears from the department from April onwards. We have made an ask in our action plan about what that revenue and capital requirement will be. The minister's made that commitment, but that's the moment that we'll know whether the plan has been fully committed to or not. Every indication we've been given, every conversation that we've had, either with officials or with the minister and his team themselves, is that will turn up and that will happen. So I think you know me well enough, Sinead, and I'm sure other committee members do as well. If I don't believe that something is happening, I'll be very quick to say that, and we won't shirk from that. In terms of communicating more widely to the city and the region and Northern Ireland about whether this is happening or not, very open book for me in terms of public engagement. I've turned up at everything, accepted every media interview. But more important than that, we've actually put in here that there should be an annual report that actually demonstrates that the commitments that have been made are being met and what actually happens next. I've been very grateful to the chair and the committee to be given the opportunity to come and present back in September, I think it was. Pretty sure it was September. It was warmer anyway. And again today, and at that meeting I committed to doing that. I'm very, very happy to come back on behalf of the task force to continue this engagement as well. And in fact, I think it would be really, really important. I'm a great believer in the committee structure and in the Assembly. In my day job, we've only ever worked through the committees rather than working through ministers, because that provides that full public transparency and scrutiny that's required. So I'd be very delighted to come back again. So there's a series of things there, Sinead, either media engagements, public engagements with Derry City and Strabane District Council, and I expect to go back and present to them again now we're in the new year. Engagements through the committee, but we've also committed to reporting on an annual basis about what work has happened and what needs to happen next.
Okay, and you've heard, as I have heard, Stephen, the calls for an independent oversight body. What is your thoughts in that? And it's not just for the delivery of this, but the context of the input from the Irish government as well, because we know that the Irish government is heavily involved in terms of supporting this campus, and yet they're not really sitting in any oversight arrangement. What's your thoughts on the independence of the task force, and should there be another level of oversight over and above that in order that we can see the delivery is happening in a fair and equitable way in terms of the government and the executive?
It's not a job that's being asked of us. That's a political decision that needs to be, political agreement that needs to be made. If there's a political agreement that's made and they ask the task force to participate in that, very happy to do that. No objection to any of that piece at all. But what we're doing is delivering what's already been politically agreed. So many times in this part of the world we go, this is what we want, this is what we want, this is what we want. Okay, we're going to give you what you want. No, but we want something different now instead. Let's get on and deliver what's already been agreed. And if you go through, and as I have done, because it's one of my favourite documents, going through the NDNA agreement and putting little highlighted lines about the things that have already happened and the things that are still to happen, you can see that there's some bits in there that are still, particularly for this region, are still to be delivered. In terms of the engagement of the Irish government, they're engaged directly in the work of the task force. We have our senior representative responsible for that cross-border piece from the department, the equivalent department in the south. We've written to the Irish government, and there was asks in our interim report. We've had a response from them. My understanding is that no request has been made of them from anybody who's proposing these other models to actually provide an independent cross-border scrutiny piece. Certainly in our engagements, either with the Taoiseach or with the Minister or with the Secretary-General, that's not something that's come through at this point in time. Is the cross-border piece important? Absolutely. This is a cross-border region. this city is at the centre of that cross-border region. It moves it away from a city of 110,000 people to a region of 350,000 people. When you consider a region of 350,000 people and the infrastructure requirement that they have and need around health services, transportation, education, etc., 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 you begin to understand and plan in a spatial way of which there are services provided on either side and which people benefit from either side. So that is something that works very well. It was led initially by the council, and I think it's a very good piece of work, and it continues to be a thread that runs through what we do. We have a section in our report that talks about what the Irish government's response was. They make it clear that the 55, the shared island building, which is going just directly behind where we are, they'd like to see delivery on that, and then depending on who the new government in Ireland will be, there may be future opportunities through the Department for Taoiseach, but in terms of the direct relevant department, they don't have a direct role here. What they've additionally said, though, is that the graduate entry medical school that is incredibly successful on this campus, which will be delivering its first graduates at the end of this year, should undergraduate places be made available, they would be keen to purchase some of those undergraduate places. As you know, we lost our mother back in October. I had 2 interesting experiences with doctors as part of that that's relevant to this job. First was a young doctor in Galvin Hospital. I asked him where he trained. He said he trained in Poland. I said, why did you train in Poland? He says, my entire year, we're all from Ireland. He says, there's no places in Ireland for us to train as doctors, so we've come to we went to Poland, and the choice is Poland or Italy. If they had the opportunity to train at home, they would have trained at home. The second one was alongside the Foyle Hospice. One of the graduate entry medical school doctors attended our home with the Foyle Hospice and provided care for my mother. So I could see directly in the last quarter the impact that this university has and this can have in terms of the provision of a workforce for a healthier community on a cross-border basis.
Absolutely. And also in your report you have spoke about private sector investment for student accommodation and can you just talk about a little bit about the engagement with residents as well and the concerns that they've had? And I know there's been ongoing work in that, and that's really to be welcomed in this report because it's the holistic expansion that is really important in how it engages with the community. So can you just even talk to that as well?
Yeah, so on the first one, in terms of the private sector opportunity that exists, there is in the region, there's about 14 individual projects in various stages of gestation from private sector developers that will equate to roughly about 2,000 beds. Now, will all of those turn up? Probably not. Will other ones appear? Probably so. The opportunity that now exists for property owners and developers in the city and property developers from outside the city, the opportunity is now clear to those people. There's a requirement for a minimum of 3,600 beds. Our clear signal is that it's moving towards the river and towards the city centre and away from that community that feels under stress from university, the current university provision and potential expansion. There's also actions in our report around HMOs. There's a requirement for the Minister for Infrastructure to issue a direction, I think it's called, that will allow Derry City Council to implement its HMO policy and to support the development of the campus, both in terms of purpose-built student accommodation as well as managing that HMO stress that the community feel under. So the community piece is really, really important. The one benefit of having all or not all, but a vast bulk of the university students in a couple of square miles in Belfast, South Belfast city centre, has been that we've learnt from some of the things that went wrong, particularly around that HMO policy, that Holy Lands piece that kind of developed over a number of years, and also learnt from what's happening currently with the new purpose-built student accommodation provision that's happening there. We engage with the Students' Union about what works well with that and what doesn't work well. They have some issues with the purpose-built stuff. They have some issues with landlords. They have some issues with some of the quality of provision that's happening, and we want to try to ensure that whatever lessons can be picked up from that experience is passed through to this as well. I continue to engage with the community immediately, interfacing with the university. I've done that over Christmas. I will continue to do that going forward. There's a very active, well-structured community sector in and around here, which play a really important role, not just articulating the views of residents, but bringing residents together to actually work out what can be usefully done. And we brought those in as one of the first pieces of evidence to the task force was the community and voluntary sector, and they were very supportive of expansion. They had some really good ideas that we've included in our plan, some investments that are required from the department and other departments to see those structures put in place. And in addition to that, the opportunity that they see for that community to actually engage actively in expansion, so including managing accommodation themselves and using the profits as a social economy model to actually provide participation for people who may have been furthest away from university education to actually get involved in that as well. So that piece has been really important to us, and we have the community and voluntary sector on our task force, and we continue to engage with them externally too as well.
Good. And we had some good announcements just on the 18th of December as well about land at the Cape and sold to the university, so the intentions are there. I have a few other questions, but we'll go on.
Chair,
Thank you, Gary.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Stephen and Linda. Again, congratulations on the piece of work that you've done, extensive piece of work, and it's good to get buy-in from so many partners. I suppose I want to touch on what Sinead finished with there was the private sector investment. We have seen in the past where various achievements have been made by the city. Think of the City of Culture, for example, where a lot of the private sector investment actually didn't show up or materialise. We had projected investment that just didn't materialise. One of the things that I see, and certainly working with some applicants and developers around accommodation, is the very slow pace. You've said that the 2,000, I think you said 2,000 beds were achievable with Duncragan and other pieces of work that's ongoing at the minute. That obviously falls well short of the minimum of 3,600. You effectively would need to double that. For me, looking at the plan, as I say, very much supportive of it, but I think that is going to be one of the biggest challenges to overcome. And I suppose the question being is that, where do you see this significant private sector investment? As you're working with people obviously at the minute, but to achieve the 10,000, you're going to really need that. And I think that working with the planning system as it is, working with residents and dealing with some of the challenges around HMOs that exist in various parts of our communities at this minute in time, I think that's going to be the biggest challenge. And I suppose just maybe talk a wee bit more as to how you think you're going to achieve that.
Yeah, so the 14 have turned up since our interim report in September. So between the period of September and December, those 2,000 opportunities became apparent. In the publishing of the actual action plan now, and the economic data that sits alongside all of that, and the timeline that's demanded in terms of when students will be on campus and when facilities will be in place, that provides the level of granularity in some respects that can sit and accompany applications that developers can make. Since we've even published in December, other people have appeared. We've reported the fact that there's 2,000. There's projects there for about 2,000 already at various points of gestation coming along. So nothing beats people seeing things actually happening. The university and the city council worked on the site for the new graduate entry medical school of medicine building along Strand Road. That really only became visible to people when the university put some hoarding on it. It'll become more visible when you start to see cranes and people in hard hats and high vis starting to happen. So it's important that people begin to actually see things physically happening and not hoardings. Begin to see those additional numbers starting to arrive. That's the bit that brings confidence to private sector developers. I've had a number of conversations, and as you've had yourself, that people begin to understand that there's a confidence there that finally these numbers are starting to be delivered. There's already stress on accommodation here, and we're already under-providing here. So on a rough rule of thumb, about 60% of students in Belfast stay in some form of private sector accommodation in Belfast. In this city it's 40% because we've only been able to provide for 40%. So most people need to travel here by either public transport or car. That adds to the stress that's happening in the community nearest by in terms of parking in particular. So actually the need and demand and the market already exists for what we have now, never mind what's going forward. But there has been a response to that call to action from September through to December, and I know that that's going to continue and it's probably going to escalate.
Yeah. No, I think that a lot of damage has actually been done by some developers, to be honest with you, over this last 12 months. Some of the way that the accommodation has been opened and used, particularly emergency accommodation, people do have to be housed, but a lot of damage, unfortunately, has been done, particularly in residential areas. So it's not to be negative. You've recognised it as a barrier, and I think that to me is going to be a standout feature in terms of what can be done to try and address those concerns.
Can I just when I went and spoke with the local community beginning of this process, they're very complimentary about students. We're very supportive of students. They see students as a very valuable addition to their community. They had concerns about developers coming in on the HMO side and building bale houses and one house going from one family with one car to 8 people and 6 cars, and that was causing the stress. We're making it really clear we want to see people turn up and provide student accommodation, but our preference is that it's purpose-built student accommodation that's moving from this campus towards the river and towards the city centre. In addition to that, this city looks and feels different. There's a different vibe around here. What you see as you arrive into that part of North Belfast around the Ulster University's campus at the moment, where everything's gone high-rise, vertical boxes, etc., etc., etc. That won't fit this place. The response here is going to be on a smaller scale. It's going to be units of 40 and 60, 12, whatever the case may be, that actually meets and fills up the scar sites and brings vibrancy to the city centre. That's how we maximise the value of having these students financially and economically to the city. So we're putting a clear signal that we want HMOs. We can't get in the way of that. It's a valid planning option for people. But we hear that community. We understand the stress that they're under. We want people to provide purpose-built student accommodation towards the city centre, and that's our preference.
The other question I wanted to touch on was in terms of achieving the 10,000. In the report, Stephen, it was mentioned around the DOH, the Department for Health courses, the fact that 30% of the overall makeup of the courses will be effectively required to come from DOH commissioned places. I suppose you've met with, I think, the Infrastructure Minister, obviously you've met with the Economy Minister. In terms of the Health Minister, he's going to be very important in terms of their commitment. And if we're honest about it, in the past, the Health Department hasn't always been supportive, particularly when it came to the medical school, for example. It wouldn't have happened, actually, if it hadn't been for the political direction that was given. So how confident are you that those DOH places can be achieved, given the fact that it's going to be 30%? Well, that's what's going to make up the 10,000.
So one of the additional pieces of expertise we brought onto the task force was people responsible for workforce planning within the department, and they've been a very valuable addition to the work. They've already delivered in terms of places for this current or the incoming year. We will be engaging with the Health Minister on the back of this, because we now have a clear academic plan from the university and others about what's required. We have all the evidence required from the Western Trust. the numbers of doctors and clinicians and other healthcare professionals per head of population in the West is significantly, it's more than half, less than half, sorry, of what's in the East. So there's people are sick here, and it's just as important that they get the services that they're required in this part of Northern Ireland as it is in other parts of Northern Ireland. So all the evidence is that we require, that the health department require, is available to us. To be fair to them, they've committed, and those places are turning up. That wasn't the case in the current academic year. The Irish government picked up some of those places instead. But there is a commitment going forward to the next academic year that those places will be commissioned by the department. The one thing to say, though, is that the money that comes alongside those commissioned places is roughly half of what a university student places elsewhere. So we just need to make sure that we're really clear that we can make the work of this task force is clear that delivering this 10,000 can improve health outcomes for people in the West, including in Donegal and elsewhere. But this project is more than just health outcomes, it's economic outcomes, it's social and cultural outcomes, and the programme that the university have delivered in terms of an academic plan delivers all of that.
Just a final point, Chair, just to finish on a positive note. I've been around in politics since 2010. I've seen various plans come forward. I do see a step change with this one. I really do. I think that certainly as elected representatives, particularly the local ones, we are behind this. And we will certainly do what we can to try and support, particularly around the planning issues, the infrastructure issues, and also working with, for example, the Communities Minister as well around that whole public realm place. As you say, the vibe has changed, and it's a positive one. And I suppose the onus now is on us as to how we can support the task force going forward. So thanks, Stephen. Thanks, Linda. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Garrett. Padraig?
Thank you, and Happy New Year to you both. But late saying that now, maybe. But thank you for attending today. And it's always good to get a catch up and see where things are at. I suppose for me, there's a couple of points. I did want to clarify one point just first. It was just when you had said about the 50 plus courses, that was by 2029, was it, or 2032?
2032 by the end of this process.
32, perfect.
Some of those are already been advertised, so that work is underway.
Yeah. And obviously, it's really encouraging to see that, particularly the allied health ones. And I want to come on to a question just around your engagement with businesses and with other educational institutions in the area. But I suppose I did want to start just by saying, and I know I said it the last time as well, but for me, we do need to sit back here and actually say, and identify that this is not a zero-sum game. Bringing students to Magee, growing Derry, growing the Northwest benefits everybody. And I think one of the personal points that if I were to look at from my experience, and I know we've discussed this in the past, is that one of the challenges and one of the reasons why Magee hasn't reached its full potential before is that people see it as a Derry issue and for Derry to sort. And to me, that's problematic. So in terms of, I suppose, the aerial view of this, we need to actually recognise the benefits for everybody right across society, and particularly, obviously, for the Northwest, but to see the investment that the people need to get behind as well. And just in that context, I know it's been touched on a couple of times already, but in terms of your cross-border working, your All-Ireland working, can you just touch on sort of the next steps in that? Where do you see the potential for investment from the Dublin government, but actually that localised piece as well around engagement with businesses in Donegal, ATU, colleges, and that broader piece as well? Where do you see that All-Ireland Northwest piece?
So thanks, Padraig. In terms of, start at the end of that and work my way back, Louis, but in terms of ATU, their principal, their chief executive, was directly engaged in the task force. It's probably a difficult place for him, because he probably feels worried that the development of this campus may be at the detriment of his own campus. We've been really clear that, as you've rightly said, this isn't a zero-sum game. This isn't at the detriment of Belfast, Coleraine, nor indeed Letterkenny, for that matter. This is about providing more opportunities for more young people to get the skills that they require to ensure that they have a successful life that's making a contribution economically, through health, culturally, or whatever, to this part of the world. ATU are very supportive of this piece of work. There's lots of ongoing work between both Ulster University and ATU in Letterkenny, particularly through the Northwest Tertiary Education Cluster. We talk about that, we reference that in our report, the fact that that needs invested in and more stabilised for the longer term, because that's of benefit to not just ATU and to Ulster University, but the Northwest Regional College and the ETBs in Donegal. The way that this part of the island, whatever side of the border that people are sitting on, will be successful is through investing in the skills and capabilities of the people that are here. And we're very supportive of that. There are cross-border shared island funds available. Those have been maxed out, is our understanding, at this point in time. A new government, a new Taoiseach may, and it's every indication that we've seen so far, may come with additional money into that shared island pot. There is a large investment, physical investment coming here, but there's also other projects that are really important, so kind of cross-border work that's ongoing on that educational side, pairing together academics in certain areas, actually looking, and one thing that's particularly exciting for me, looking at the potential for two things. One is investing in a photonics program, because Seagate Technology are world leading. It's an anchor tenant, commercial anchor tenant. So actually funding a cross-border photonics piece between ATU and Ulster University would be really important. Doesn't add a huge amount in terms of student numbers, which is our primary objective, but does add a hell of a lot in terms of sustaining the jobs that currently exist, but also developing new jobs. And then other cross-border co-education elements, again, don't add a huge amount in terms of student numbers, but do a lot in terms of increasing the capability and capacity of the people involved on that basis. We heard about a program involving civil servants, not an exchange program, but an MSc education program, civil servants in Ireland, civil servants in Northern Ireland working together on some things. We'd be keen to see some of those continue on.
Yeah, no, I think those are perfect examples of how people can work together, particularly across this region when people are working so closely together anyway. Just you touched on my next point, which was just around, I suppose, that idea of independence or independent oversight or whatever, and to me, that kind of misses the point of the task force, which is that the task force is an independent body. It's set up with a function to, yes, to support this project, to support the minister, but also to challenge, and with a distinct challenge function. And to me, the likes of Paul and others being on that body actually showcase that. There's a wealth of experience, a wealth of knowledge, and a wealth of vision within the task force. So I think, to me, that is the body that needs to be critically evaluating how things are going on a continued basis. Just around the pathways which you've mentioned in terms of the college, in terms of Magee, obviously, and local businesses as well, what other engagement has there been? And we obviously glad to see Anna from the Chamber here today, and I know you've had regular conversations with the Chamber. Are there any pieces which, additional to those courses, which you're looking at with local businesses to kind of target any needs or any economic drivers which they see coming up?
I'll maybe ask Linda to come in on that, plus another piece from earlier in a second. But just to say, one of the very important pieces that we had from we brought employers in the city in to meet with us, particularly employers in rising sectors that some of them were on BBC Foyle yesterday even as well. And the interesting thing that they came back with was the university is able to provide them with the really good, solid base metal, and it's up to them to turn this into gold in many respects. And what they are very keen is that, and the university took notice of this, is that they want people leaving university, whether it's here or whether it's in Belfast, Coleraine, Letterkenny or wherever, with a stronger sense of consulting skills. That doesn't mean that they turn them into business consultants, but what it means is that people are able to sit down, talk to each other, be confident, critically evaluate, be challenging, ask questions, comprehend what's going on, come back with solutions. And they currently see that happening really strongly from the graduates that are coming from this campus, but they think that there's more can be done in that area. So it's not always necessarily about the types of courses that are being run, but the types of education people get on those courses. With people in the graduate entry medical school that are engineers, that are now going to be doctors. They've got the skills that are required to move from that engineering undergraduate level, but actually move into that medical and caring and clinical side. So finding the right types of skill is just as important as finding the right type of degree at the end of this process, and that's what we're very keen that the university does, that maximises the capabilities of people involved. Linda, you want to take?
Yeah, just a couple of wee things. Just on the cross-border funding, but to be started, so we've £150 million secured to date, and we really have most of the funding or commitments for funding up to 2029. And one part of our task force, Chair, that you'll remember, that we actually had a presentation from the Republic of Ireland government around where the opportunities lie in the future for future projects and future initiatives. So we obviously are going through a new government in the south at the moment, and there is a meeting actually arranged with our permanent secretary, our deputy secretary, and ourselves, actually with comrades in the south about what those opportunities might look like going forward. So that has actually already been looked at. In terms of the private sector stuff, one of the things that worked very, very well with the task force was it wasn't just about writing a plan about capital and about actually students. There was a lot of consideration given by the chair and the members around 4 specific areas. One of them is around, is there any specific initiatives that we need to look at in terms of special funding initiatives or new financial instruments that we need to look at as a department to support the development of that. That was one group. But there was also a group actually on business. So it was led by Dawn McLaughlin and Invest NI, and non-executive director in Invest NI, the Chamber of Commerce through Stephen Lindsay as a deputy chair, and then also Gavin Colleen actually through the skills. And through them they identified 3 potential opportunities. Some of the stuff that you're talking around, and there's a commitment in the report that talks about £800,000 a year to actually really step up a lot of that cross-border, a lot of that business support and initiatives, not just in the Northwest, but actually across Northern Ireland as well. The other thing to sort of say as well is, obviously with the amount of capital infrastructure, there is an assumption in the KPMG report that a lot of that will be locally beneficial, but there's also a big spread of that across the rest of Northern Ireland. So there's massive opportunities in terms of just even the construction phases around, Stephen referred to the 9 capital projects, but there's also 9 refurb projects identified in the report as well. So there is going to be an awful lot of work engaging with the local chamber, engaging with the council and all of the local business bodies to try and ensure that we maximise the opportunities for the businesses and that here locally as well.
Oh, brilliant. And look, it was just the final point for you as well was around that kind of accessibility piece. So one of the things which I know is regularly talked about by the college, by Magee, by businesses in Derry, is that idea of the metric mile of being able to go from the college and the Magee, come out with whatever qualification. And in terms of that accessibility piece, where do you see that fitting into these courses? Because obviously now all universities have become more accessible and are looking at different entry pathways and so on. But specifically for these courses, do you think there's something innovative that we could be doing within this to say, let's try this out, let's see? Because when there's so many new courses coming on, is there an ability to try something different and actually see how that might work?
I'll let Linda take that.
Yeah, of course.
So, look, again, one of the subgroups was around widening our participation and around that we are really uniquely placed actually in the city because all of those institutions and organisations are very close together.
Yeah.
And it's interesting you're telling about the metric mile. We've talked about the square mile and that in terms of the compactness and that of the city. So that is a major opportunity, I think, here. One that hasn't been missed on the task force. And again, Leo Murphy and again, my colleagues in the department and our widening participation team in that have been looking about how do we get greater participation locally, how do we get the streamlined approach. So there already is 3 initiatives actually under the widening access and participation scheme in the report that are looking about how do we get much more closer alignment in that. So, and I know that those particular organisations and bodies are keen to see that as well, because obviously it's important that there's a much more streamlined approach in terms of using our budgets and that much more efficiently as well. So that has been looked at initially in the widened participation, and those subgroups that we refer to will continue as we go forward. And even just picking up on a point that Sinead had raised earlier around the communications piece, Chair. I mean, part of the one of the things that the task force are very clear under Stephen's direction is obviously about making sure that we do communicate with either local residents or forums, but there will be a formalised communications plan as well as part of the programme board that will be not just about the annual report but regular communications about what's happening, when it's happening, and that will be delivered. That'll be a key document for the project board and the steering group and the task force to be overseeing and managing, so that if things aren't on track, I'm probably very assured that we will be pulled into line very quickly around some of those things.
And we have, as I said earlier, involvement from the community and voluntary sector, and they've looked around and seen, well, where are the best models? What has worked best elsewhere? And brought those projects forward, and we've asked for some of those to be funded as part of this delivery. Brilliant.
Thanks very much, and I think it's really positive. It's really, really good to see the report published in full. I have read it. Glad to know. I would hope others have as well.
There's any typo. We don't want to see them.
I had the red pen out, Stephen. But, no, it's really positive, and obviously a huge body of work from both yourselves and others has gone on it. So I want to just thank you for your work on it as well.
Thank you.
Diana.
Thank you very much. Firstly, Chair, apologies for
No
being
problem.
late. Weather conditions weren't great coming from Fermanagh, but hello, Stephen and Linda, nice to see you. Thank you for coming here today. I wasn't at the earlier time you came to present, Stephen. I just joined the committee at the end of September, but I have to commend you on the task force work. It's a very ambitious project and one that other regions would be looking at with great admiration. So some of the questions in my mind have been addressed, and thank you for the information. Moving to a stage there with the increased capacity of students, how can you expand on the work you've done to ensure the availability of specialised tutors? Because you do reference topics such as robotics, AI, optoelectronics, and you said the rising sectors. So are you convinced, are you assured that there is that pipeline of specialist tutors coming through? I see the Independent Review of Education of Northern Ireland in 2021 identified that there was a gap. They had concerns about the recruitment of future leaders, that specific shortages, particularly in STEM. So has the task force looked at and ensured that there is a pipeline of specialist tuition coming through? So that's my first question.
No is the short answer, because that's really for the university themselves.
All right.
We can't get involved in. It may form part of your conversation with the university later, but we can't form views on how they recruit and who they recruit. So it's up to them to deal with that. But it's a very important question, and I'll commit that we will be raising that at our next task force meeting with the Vice Chancellor and the Assistant Vice Chancellor. We started to kind of explore, certainly in our earlier report, we started to explore that element, but it was really clear that we started to overreach what our role and responsibilities in our terms of reference were at that point in time. So it was appropriate that we step back from that piece and leave that to the university.
Okay.
Equally, we can't do the same in terms of the department. We can't do the same in terms of City Council. Those bodies need to recruit, and they have their own role and responsibility in that area.
Sure.
But we'll raise it as a concern, absolutely. I think it's a very useful point to pick up.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. And then just really on the action plan, it says that the task force will be looking at plans for recruitment or deployment of university staff to teach these courses. Where will the deployment come from, or how would that affect? Would it have a direct impact on Coleraine campus, for example?
So what the university have been doing is that they, because they have a multi-campus model, some of their lectures teach on a multi-campus basis. So it's not about moving necessarily lectures from one campus to another, although with some programs that has happened in the past. but it's about adding to that piece. A lot of the expansion to this point in time, and we're in and around 6,000 students currently, which is about 50% more since NDNA was initially agreed, has been about complementing with additional capacity at this campus other programs that are happening elsewhere. That will continue, and that requires lecturers to engage on a multi-campus basis as well. But there'll be additional new programs here, which will require additional new headcount in terms of university lecturers. But not just that, they need to be attracted to any institution, and that means good research, good facilities in terms of research facilities for them and accommodation for them, not residential, but work accommodation for them. So that's a piece of work that the university has undertaken, I understand, but we can't get into the middle of that direct recruitment piece.
Okay, thank you.
I think just to further to that as well, just to sort of reiterate, the Minister's really clear in this position around the really supportive of a multi-campus model. And I think in terms of the Magee campus development, it will be targeted through very targeted policies in terms of increasing courses, as Stephen has said, but changing policies not to suit that. But it's about creating additional opportunities without reducing opportunities in the other campuses. And I think he's been very clear about that since the initiation, because that is something that is naturally a challenge and a worry probably for other areas. But the Ministers have been really clear on that position.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Philip?
And welcome. It's hard, like others have said, not to be enthused by the ambition, both that we've heard today, but also in the report for the university itself, but also for the region. A lot of people have asked you about the courses and the new courses, and I mean, obviously we're the economy committee, so as well as supporting the task force in its role, we have a role in assisting the Minister build an economy that's fit for purpose. So the new courses, I'm just keen to work out the relationship or the discussion in a bit more detail about how they came about. Was it on the basis of the recommendation to the task force after your engagement with local industry community, or was this driven by the university? And secondly, are these specific courses new, or are they similar courses that are maybe supplied by other universities or even other campuses within the north, or are these kind of like standout courses that people across the north wanted to do? They would have to come here to study.
It's a mix of all of that.
Okay.
So there's the head of academic planning for the university, the assistant vice chancellor, now sits on the task force. That was a really important additional element, because at the end of the day, he develops out the plan for what programs are going to be where, on what dates, etc., etc., etc. So he heard the evidence from the business community, heard the evidence from the community and voluntary sector, heard the evidence from the health sector and others, and that allowed him to get a picture of trying to forecast at this point in time what future demand may well be. So what are people beginning to move towards? But in addition to that, he heard about the type of place this is, culturally, civically, etc., etc., etc. So, for instance, liberal arts are moving a programme back to here, which they haven't been so English and that sort of stuff. But that seems obvious in the city of Heaney and others. But you begin to sense, he got the really strong sense that actually this is about contributing more than just economically, but about civically and culturally as well, because of all the combination of all of that evidence. Is it new programs? Some of them are. Some of them will be. This is the only place that some of these programs will be taught. Some of them aren't. Some of them are purely based on what the university, knowing all the applications that it gets in every year. It's a massive, valuable piece of data where they know how many people are applying for particular types of programs, how many people want to do IT or engineering or geography or liberal arts or whatever the case may be. So part of this is about meeting that demand. As the demand grows in terms of the available student number market, as well as some of the future forecast and what needs to be required. But there's definitely stuff on there around regulatory technology, around AI, future type stuff that this part of the world, both as a city, the West, and including into Donegal, has a particular opportunity in. So some of it's about capturing future opportunity, but a lot of it's about capturing where the demand is and where that growth is actually coming from the application data that exists.
Okay. And I mean, just lastly, Chair, I mean, this is the second time we've met you, and it's very useful. And the task force obviously has a very important role, making sure the Minister carries out and the Department carries out the proposals and the plans. I mean, have you any advice or any asks of us as an economy committee and how we can help and assist you in that role?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting just in Padraig's comments. Sinead referenced it first, but Padraig kind of distilled it down a bit more there around this scrutiny piece, the independent scrutiny piece. Maybe I'm old school, maybe I'm old fashioned, but I prefer my scrutiny to come from people who are democratically elected. If we wanted to have everything passed out to quangos, third parties, independent bodies, what's the point in electing people? You guys are put your career on the line once every 5 years and stand over your record. And I take great pride walking in and putting X's or 1s and 2s and 3s against people's names, because I actually feel that's me participating in the democratic process and I'm sending people to represent me. So this is a really important body for me. In my day job, as I said, we've only ever engaged through the committees in the work that we do. Why? Because it has a scrutiny role, but it's across all the parties, and it's not party political as a result of that. You do have time to get into the detail on things that doesn't exist elsewhere. Is there a role for the task force as part of that? I'd be delighted and love to come back again, because this provides us with a platform to talk about what we've achieved so far, but where our concerns are. And I started the meeting with, here's your one moment, and it's coming up in the next 3 months. Is the budget being made available? If it's not being made available, it's a good opportunity for the community to question why. To me, keep inviting us back and continue to engage with us, because we'd be very happy to do that.
Great job. Thank you.
Kate.
Thank you very much. And that was going to be one of my questions, because it's been such a fulsome presentation, and I wasn't here for the first presentation either, so I found it really useful. I was in the Belfast Stories site yesterday, and it really struck me how transformed the city has become because of the Ulster expansion there, and I'm really optimistic and hopeful for Derry as well. You've talked a lot about community and student engagement, lessons from South Belfast, which was what I was also going to ask, and what the committee can do to support. So I really don't have much else to add, just that as a committee, I think we're all very keen to support you. And having met with one of our members, our Derry members, for coffee before we came here, he said everyone's really supportive of this. They just want to see it delivered. And so I think we definitely have a role, so just to say support and thank you for everything you've been doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, Stephen, thank you very much. And thank you. I read through and read it the last time. It's so positive. And whenever we come up, it was up the last time, there's a buzz here that we don't get maybe or hear about until you're here. So it is really positive. One of the things we were chatting on the way up, and I just want to tease something out, because you've dealt with so much and you've given so much information. But I was chatting about, what does reconciliation look like in 2025 moving forward? What does shared society look like? And it is that there, in this area, you're looking at what that look. You referenced the centre of the region rather than the northwest of Northern Ireland, if you like. And it is that wider piece of the figure you said, 350,000 people rather than 100,000 people or whatever. And that wider piece of sharing this place. But when you take that, one of the lines has the Irish government that Magee shouldn't be at the expense of the Atlantic or the ATU in Letterkenny. So how do you move that from this point, moving that forward? What does that partnership look like between ATU and Magee to allow the two to help and thrive the whole area rather than kind of compete against each other? What does that look like? You know?
So the Irish government in their written response back to us made it clear that their priority remains the growing of the Atlantic Technical University campus in Letterkenny.
Okay.
We have a role in support of Paul Hannigan, the principal there, Chief Executive, that he gets the resources that he needs from his government in order to ensure that that's delivered. I've looked at the growth numbers of this campus of Ulster University and also the Letterkenny campus, and sadly Letterkenny has flatlined over the last number of years. They haven't really grown in terms of student numbers. The good news is that whilst the 50% growth here on this campus, it hasn't been at the expense of that. But is there a dynamic going on there that meant that their initial growth has now plateaued? And is there something that we need to do in support of Paul and his colleagues in ATU and his colleagues in the department to get the resources that he needs for his future expansion? There is a tension in that people in Donegal and probably people involved with ATU, though they don't articulate this as openly as I do, that the Irish government are investing Irish taxpayers' money in developing a building here on this campus outside of their jurisdiction. There is a tension that we're going, well, what about us in Letterkenny? Where's our taxpayers' money invested in our piece? So that relationship is a tricky one for both Ulster University and for ATU, and as a result, we need to navigate that sensitively. Where I think is where there's no contention and no potential for conflict is in that cooperation piece. Mm-hmm. There is potential for conflict in a competition piece, and we're very keen to avoid that because that's neither in Letterkenny's interest.
So what does the cooperation piece look like going forward then? Is it main courses?
So it's partly about sharing resources,
Yeah.
It's partly about co-teaching, it's partly about ensuring that there's joint working on potential funds for that photonics piece that I mentioned before, that RegTech cluster that I mentioned before, that bringing people from same industries but from either sides of the border together on a piece of work together in terms of their a master's program, etc., etc., etc. That's the area where all boats rise, rather than something that's been seen as being a competitive piece or the other.
I think just further to that as well, conversation with some of the local businesses as well. So, for example, some of the legal companies that have maybe a business here in the north of Ireland, Northern Ireland, and have an office in the south of Ireland. Mm-hmm. They're looking at there's different teaching requirements or different regulatory requirements, and they're looking for where is the synergies between those, and obviously the models between Letterkenny Institute or ATU and obviously University of Ulster, those can all be explored. So that reconciliation piece, as Stephen said, it's not about stripping out one winning over the other. It's about where is the complementarities that are genuinely there, that could make good sense as opposed to trying to compete, as you say.
Listen, thank you very much. Really, really appreciate your time as well. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Now, on behalf of the committee, personally, thank you once again for all your important work on this. And I'm sure that our members for FOIL and indeed wider members will ensure that you're back on a regular basis, Stephen. So thank you very much for your work, and we look forward to continuing to work in partnership with you on this important issue.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll just finish. There's where we were supposed to meet originally was the minor hall. I moved to this more modern, probably warmer part of the campus, which was in all our interests. But in the minor hall, as people will know, it's a former Presbyterian college, and there's a beautiful stained glass window in the back of the minor hall that was donated by some of the first beneficiaries or contributors to the university, and one of their first professors. And there's a bit of the stained glass window that I stumbled upon that I really liked, which I thought was appropriate, and it is alike the interests of all to bury old feuds in a common grave, to turn a new page in the nation's history. And this is, as I said at the launch, this is a city of protest. It's going back through its entire history, and those will continue beyond this piece of work that we're doing. But we're very clear we're working in a common interest here, which is the benefit of young people that get the education that they require, that in turn benefits this part of the world and both sides of the border, both socially, economically, as well as civically. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Members just want to seek agreement then in terms of next steps from that, Peter.
So, Chairperson, is the committee content to write to the department? Members look at page 94 of the packs. That's the diagram which shows you the governance arrangements. We just write to the department, ask them just to explain how the task force will fit in with that. 'Cause they're not actually on the picture, but there's clearly, as has been intimated, something is they have in mind. Additionally, the committee can ask the department how they intend to track and report on the spending, which is quite a considerable sums, and also just about the budget. As was indicated, if you remember back to December, there's a fairly long capital programme. There's a lot of stuff which is pre-committed, but the number one priority after that is Magee. So the question was, given what they've got, how will they get to Magee, if you understand what I'm saying? So they'll have to pay for the pre-committed stuff because that's contractual obligation. But very next thing on the list, number one priority, definitely Magee. So the question there is, how did you do, department, in that in the budget exercise? Is there any sort of danger in terms of that money for Magee expansion?
Intent. Okay, we'll then move to item 7, members, which is evidence from the Ulster University themselves, and I'm delighted that we have Paul Bartholomew, Vice-Chancellor of the University. Firstly, thank you, sir, for your hospitality and allowing us to come here today. We're delighted to have you, and I'm just, with your indulgence, hand over to you at this stage, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation, and I know that there was a precursor letter that we responded to, giving some briefing back, I think, in relation to questions posed. So rather than present against that, given that we've already submitted a document, I'm perfectly happy, if it's okay with you, Chair, to proceed to handle any questions that might emerge from that document or your previous discussion or any other thoughts that you might have about Ulster University.
Perfect, no problem at all. Well, thank you, and thank you for sending through the briefing. Obviously, Vice-Chancellor, the evidence had said that he didn't wish to give a wrong commentary in relation to the strategic policy unit, though obviously it has caused issue in terms of a matter of both public and political commentary. So I'm just keen to get from a committee's perspective to understand, not talking about individuals, but how this policy came into place, and in your view, how it benefits the university.
Sure. The policy and the appointment process, I think, was what came under some scrutiny. It is an established process called the exceptional talent pool, and that exceptionalness it relates as much to particularity in terms of a compelling proposal that's in the university's strategic interest. It's the first time that I've used the policy since I've been Vice-Chancellor. It has been used previously sparingly. It's not a usual appointment process. But from time to time we have that discretion. I say we, me really, has the discretion to make appointments through that process. When we got to a point that was a good strategic fit, I invited a proposal against it. I took HR advice in relation to that in terms of how could we move forwards, and the advice was, well, you could use the exceptional talent pool. So I engaged in that process. I don't think there's anything controversial about it. I don't think it should have created the amount of commentary that it did. We've used it before with no such commentary going, around previous appointments, and as such, I'm not sure why it would have elicited the same this time. I think what we have is a unit now within the university that's able to enact some work, both for us as a university, my unit or my office in particular, to provide some advice to me in such things as public consultations that the university gets asked to comment on. We had very limited capacity to, well, we've got a lot of capability across the university, but a way to be able to draw all of that together and to write substantive documents fell within the office, and this gives us new capacity to deal with that, while also making appointments that were into the academic body of the university to contribute both to student learning, to research outputs potentially, but also to provide a service for in terms of strategic policy analysis. As a university with a strategy that has as one of its commitments to be in that space, it's a useful thing for us to be doing. And so it's absolutely within my discretion to make such appointments, and I did so. I think that we'll see good things from that unit on behalf of Northern Ireland, and from time to time from my office, from the additional capacity and capability that's been brought to bear with making those appointments.
And obviously your view is it shouldn't have got the same public commentary that it did.
That's not quite what I said. It was the difference between where we've done it before. There have been no commentary using the same process. And this time, it's the process that has been called into question, yet the process has not been called into question despite the process being in the public domain and used for some years.
And when was it last used?
Oh, certainly before my time, and because it's my time, I couldn't give you an exact date, and I've been Vice-Chancellor between interim and for the best part of 5 years now. So.
And since you have been Vice-Chancellor, have you appointed any other former or current political elected representatives to office within the Ulster University?
No, but then that wouldn't be the basis of any of our appointments anyway. It would be based on particular skill sets, capabilities, knowledge, and so forth. I mean, in terms of people being politicians, we'd be rather agnostic to that. It would neither be something that would be positive or negative.
And what about current or former special advisors to government ministers? Have you
similar to that? We would be fairly agnostic on that view.
But you haven't appointed one previously.
I wouldn't know without going through, because it's not something that we would flag or collect data on.
Sure. It's just obviously there's guidelines in relation to the appointments and behaviour of former civil servants, of codes that they have to abide by. So published within the Civil Service Handbook, that just read into the record, is that as a general principle, there will be a 2-year ban on lobbying government on behalf of his or her former employer. The former civil servant should not engage in communication with civil service departments, including ministers, special advisors and officials, with a view to influencing a government decision or policy in relation to their own interests or the interests of their new employer. The 2-year lobbying ban would normally be in place for at least 2 years. Do you believe that that's in place with your new unit?
When you say in place, what do you mean?
So you have employed a former civil servant to be co-director of your new unit. Do you believe that they will have a role in trying to influence government policy?
Not in the lobbying capacity as it's written into that guidance.
Okay, so you believe that you'll fully follow the code of ethics that have been in place?
Well, it's not for me to follow the code of ethics, clearly, but the unit is set up to provide analysis in relation to that, and it's an academic role in that response.
Sure, okay. Just moving on then to the Magee expansion. Obviously you'll be aware, of Vice-Chancellor, of my party's particular interest, not just in the expansion here, but also in protecting the Coleraine campus. What is your view in terms of the long-term strategy now for the university in terms of continuing to grow Coleraine?
I think it remains unchanged as a strategy. We have our people, place and partnership strategy that's one of its commitments, has better campus balance. You've got to remember that the task force, prior to the task force being in existence, Ulster University already had a view in relation to what it was doing in terms of growth. It was to grow this campus. It was to stabilise and perhaps put in a small bit of growth into Coleraine. And broadly, to accommodate that within the Mazen envelope, it was to actually decrease the number of Mazen students in Belfast. That remains unchanged in relation to the task force. The task force has been tasked with changing the operating environment to bring about some additionality, and that additionality will appear on this campus. For the most part, it's not appearing on the Coleraine campus, although there is some additional growth that we anticipate that would go in there, but an order of magnitude less. And that's compensated through by ongoing reductions in students going to the Belfast campus. Within those domestic student growth, you'll be aware that there are a number of groups of students, some regulated by number caps and some not. And within, for example, within international students, I do anticipate that we'll put some international student growth in Belfast as a compensatory measure for freed up estate there, and to continue to allow us to be financially able to affect everything else we're expected to do as a multi-campus institution. So our commitment to all of our campuses remains just as strong as it did, and even prior to the task force, we'd already came up with a strategy whereby we, under our own auspices, would be rebalancing our campuses. And part of that rebalancing, no part of that rebalancing was a reduction of student numbers in Coleraine. In fact, it was small growth, and certainly year on year, from this year to last year, we've seen growth, I think, of about 204 additional students.
So if I'm a representative of Belfast, which I am, I can point to the North Belfast campus. Amazing in the transformative impact that it's had. If I'm a representative of Foyle, I can say the Magee Taskforce and look at the benefits and the investment that will bring. If I'm sitting at the Coleraine campus, would your view be that there's not the same attention or investment that is going to be given to those other two campuses that has to the one in Coleraine?
It's certainly different, and indeed I was presenting on this just last night to Causeway Coast and Glens Council, where I presented an capital enhancement programme there of some £15 million worth of works of campus enhancement, with a complete redesign of the entrance experience, redesign of student social spaces going from the front to the back of the campus, and better connectivity between the two, which demonstrates an investment in that space. There's also some new subject areas going in for the first time in the 2025 year. There's veterinary nursing. It's just been advertised. That's been in plan for some years because, as you know, there has been some interest in a school of veterinary science. I remain unconvinced that proper funding will come forwards to be able to allow a school of veterinary science to realise, but if it did, we wanted to put ourselves into the best possible position, and so we've moved ahead with designing, getting approved through the professional body, and going out to recruitment for a school of veterinary nursing with two programmes, one for those who wish to be a veterinary nurse and one for those to upgrade their skills from being a veterinary nurse to wider aspects of that profession. So we believe that if it is within the strategic direction in Northern Ireland that it wishes to have its own veterinary school and went out with a funded proposition, and that is the vital component. If we just went ahead under our own steam and put in a school of veterinary science without that proper funding, by my estimates, we'd lose at least £5 million a year, and we're not going to do that. But if the funded proposition came forward, we put ourselves in the very best position to be able to move with a bid in relation to that. So no, there's still investment there. They're all of different styles with different jobs to be done, but we have a commitment to be a multi-campus institution. That means continuing to invest in our multi-campus. And I think what people forget is that the task force and what's going on at this campus is all about additionality, and none of that additionality means that we stop being the multi-campus institution that we have always been, and we continue to invest in the dynamic nature of our campuses, and that we support all of our provision, and indeed take seriously our role in being a multi-campus institution for the whole of Northern Ireland.
But it does require you to continue to constrain the availability of undergraduate places at the Belfast campus.
Well, we've been constrained by Mazen for years. Yeah. As I say, there's no difference there. What's happening here is about additionality, and yes, there is additionality here whereby there is not additionality elsewhere, but that's perfectly consistent and expected, I think, under the NDNA commitments that were given by all parties in 2020.
And do you think to get to that figure of 10,000 that the university will have to lower their entry requirements for some undergraduate?
Well, I think entry requirements are always dynamic. We flex them every year in relation to supply and demand. So I don't know is the answer to that, because we are dynamic every year. Do I think that we will be on a downward trend? It varies between campuses. Certainly where we've done the growth here, it has meant that overall our average grades have gone down slightly, and that's written up in the task force report. But it's not done in quite as an explicit way as one might expect. A large proportion of our students that we recruit every year do not get their grades in the exact combination. So depending on how the offers are made, you could have a student that got an A and 2 Bs, and then their offer is for an A and 2 Bs, and then they end up getting 2 A's and a C. Because they didn't make their offer, we are not obliged to take them legally under their contract. But they got an A and 2 Cs, we're still likely to take them. And we have utilised that phenomenon to be able to move students, if you like, whose first choice was Belfast, to come to here by not saying we'll make a course offer to Belfast because you've not got the grade profile, and we've offered it here. And in some cases that has meant grade drops. But to be honest, those grade drops, it's still the same student who otherwise would have been going to another campus. So yes, we do use achieved grades as a way of doing that. And over time, the inevitability is if you are using that tactic to be able to grow your numbers, there will be some downward drift in grades. Now that's a really interesting thing. I mean, the grades that we achieve within the university here, and indeed it would be the same at Queen's, would be higher than you would see in England, precisely because we are constrained. And it is an absolute, direct, inevitable consequence of having a constrained system. People have to understand that when you make an offer, that then becomes legally binding. And if the student makes that offer, you have to take them. As a consequence, in order to ensure that you don't blow through your numbers, you set the grades higher than you expect students to be able to achieve, so that you can actually manage the numbers. So inevitably, you know that you're going to top up your numbers with people who are short of the grades, but the grades that you actually set have to be higher. If they weren't higher, you run the risk of everybody meeting their grades, and you've just gone through your MASN, which you're not allowed to do within a constrained system. That's not something that happens in England, where it's uncapped, and as a consequence, they don't have to be cautious in setting their grades lower to attract student numbers, because if the students do get those grades, they are allowed to accommodate as many students as they want. So it does mean that in Northern Ireland, I think that we see that the grade profile tends to be higher than in England. And indeed, some years ago, there was a statistic that said if you got 3 Cs, and I say this from memory, so it might not be quite right, but it illustrates the point. If you got 3 Cs in England, you have a 55% chance of going to university in that jurisdiction. If you got 3 Cs in Northern Ireland, it's 5% or something. So there's a real difference, but it comes out of, once it's constrained, you have to behave quite differently in relation to your offers.
And just on that point, do you think people with 3 Cs, their pathway should always be to university?
I think they should absolutely have the opportunity to do so. If you're asking me, do I think that people with 3 Cs can cope with the university course? Absolutely no question in my mind that that's the case. Pretty much in all cases. Indeed, I don't think that A-level grades are actually a fantastic indicator of future success. And indeed, where we've done our own analysis, we will be able to demonstrate that's not the case. It's not quite the same if you look at subject mix. There are certain subjects whereby having maths is really important indicator of success. But where we find that, the grade of the maths that the student achieves does not track very well with future success. And that's because we do a good job in teaching students what they need to know. Indeed, there are a whole bunch of programs at university where you can come ab initio, you've no experience in that subject at all. And indeed, we doubled the number of students going into geography when we actually dropped A-level geography as being a requirement. More students come and take up geography, and they've done just as well because we teach them degree geography. So there is some indicator of subjects are some indicator, but they're not complete. And grades will be some indicator, but they're not complete. So I do think that people should have that choice. I don't think there's a threshold. If you're for university, you're not based on grades. I don't think that would be right.
And then just finally, for me, in relation to the task force, are there anything in the report, the final report and recommendation that concerns you?
I think it's a really bold report. I think the time frame is very, very ambitious. I know that there'll be some people in this region who would feel that it's not ambitious enough. I think the people who say that, I don't think, are accepting the full gravity of what is actually being proposed, not least how long it takes to build buildings. And make no mistake, we absolutely need buildings. And the whole time frame that it takes to do that is extraordinarily tight. And I've gone on record as saying it's achievable only if everything goes absolutely right. And how often over that period do you see everything going right? So it's not impossible, but it's extraordinarily bold. I'd have been much more comfortable with 2034. The chair knows that. I've been very, very open about it.
So how confident are you that if we're back here as a committee in 2032 that we'll be surrounded by 10,000 students?
Well, I think I'm as confident as I can be, but that can be is the caveat that everything's got to go right. What I will say is that I think if we're here in 2032, we have had exactly as much, the maximum amount of growth that would have been capable. And that's really what's changed here. There will be no, if we do what we say in the task force report, there will be no stone left unturned. And I think that it's actually how I run the university. I don't really do targets so much. What I do is I say, what are the things that we need to do to get it done? And then I hold people to account on doing those things. So if we do all of the things that we said in the task force report, that will be a real achievement. Do we have a crystal ball to say, do all those things and 10,000 students will be there? No, because a building might not be finished. Student demand on certain courses that might have been predicted might not have come through. But what we need to say is, did we do all the things that we planned to do? If the answer to that is yes, that will be a success. And we can say, hand on heart, we've had as much growth as it was possible to get within the macro context that we're operating in.
Thank you very much, sir. David?
Thank you, and thanks for coming in. I'm just going to follow on from what I was talking to Stephen about there earlier, just around that the kind of reconciliation piece, the share piece around this area, looking at a wider area. What percentage of students come in to Magee and then Belfast and also Coleraine, from Donegal or from the south? What's the percentage of students that are coming?
No, I don't have those numbers off the top of my head. I wish they'd be quite straightforward to get for you on paper. Okay. If you asked me to guess, I think it would be around 10%, but it would be quite straightforward.
Okay, so right, we'll just go on 10%. So there's a projection of about 1,200 new students there or unregulated students coming forward in the Magee and those plans. What percentage of that then is from Donegal or?
We will see some skewing. We know from when we moved health sciences here, the number of applications that we started receiving from the wider northwest into Donegal went up because some students will want to stay at home and commute in. Mm-hmm. It's a bit easier to do it here than it would be if it was elsewhere. Yeah. So we've certainly seen an increase in that market, and as we do that with more programs, more duplication, more programs, we'll see a growing percentage because it becomes more viable for people from that geographical area to access that course. So it will be increasing. I couldn't say with any certainty increasing to what. Okay. What I can say is we use our previous data every year to how many students we're likely to attract into those areas. So, for example, into very popular programs, we will, because of the different timing and when people get the results, we pretty much reserve some places for ROI students as part of that process, as part of the assumption, so that as they come through, they're part of that. So we will always plan for a mix.
Okay, but the plan had 1,200 students, additional students coming in, unregulated students coming in to here. What percentage? What is the target for that from the south?
The target is from wherever wants to come, based on the data of the year in terms of where we would make offers through to. I mean, no one has a crystal ball, and no one gets to dictate this.
Yeah.
It's demand-led, which students want to come, and every single year we will have a different pattern, and we will make offers based on the applications that we receive, and then we will appoint students, and we are broadly agnostic around which subset of Mazen students, whether they're Northern Ireland or ROI students, will come to us. We will select from the pool that we have.
Okay. So
and I think if there is something within, even though the words are in the task force report, Paul, there is a good deal of specificity that I think is unhelpful, because it leads to questions like, it says this number, will you deliver on that question? That number is an approximation. That number is a projection. That number is so many years out. I can't sit here and say with certainty that number will be delivered, this number will be delivered, nor can anybody, nor should we.
Okay, so if you look at the university wider, not just you look at the 3 campuses, then how does the university market itself in the south or in GB or around the world to attract that 12? Talk us through that.
Well, we have. They are various markets to us. We've never really had any success with the GB market, but it's not just us. Yeah. There aren't a great number of GB students at Queen's either. The Irish Sea seems to represent sort of some barrier in people's mind to cross, presumably because they can't get on a train. It requires a bit more complex travel than that. So we have spent some years previously trying to attract the GB market. I'd like to attract the GB market because it doesn't count towards our Mazen cap. We've spent quite a lot of money trying to attract students from GB and have been largely unsuccessful in that regard. That doesn't mean we'll never try again, or we don't try now, and from time to time we'll run bespoke campaigns. The majority of our marketing, I suppose, for Northern Ireland will be within Northern Ireland. You'll have seen advertisements on televisions, on buses, in cinemas, but much of it is on social media, and it's directed social media done by algorithmic placement to certain demographic groups that our data demonstrates come to Ulster University. And then we think about, if not to Ulster, then where? And who are the students who don't come to us? There's very little point in advertising and marketing to students who are going to come to Ulster University anyway. So if you wish to do, for example, my old subject, diagnostic radiography, in Northern Ireland, you're coming to Ulster University because we're the only people who do it. But if you want to do business studies and you are happy to go anywhere, then you've got a lot more choice. And so broadly, we will seek to grow our market at areas whereby we run the subjects, but they go to Liverpool. We know, for example, that people for whom, within their UCAS applications, put down Ulster University, the other destinations that they put, 72% of them are across five other institutions. And they're in Liverpool, they're in Manchester, they're in Newcastle, they're in Dundee, and those are the places. And then we are aware of the feeder schools. Where do those schools send to? So we work through schools. We, I think, got a bit better at ensuring that schools will recommend us. There are still some schools in Northern Ireland where we don't get invited to open days, and we have to work on them. So we do a mixture of advertising. Then, of course, when you get into the international market, it's different again. It's different even for each country. We would know that, and the countries vary by year. You'll see from some of the commentary, the collapse in the Nigerian currency has meant to a very large drop in the Nigerian students that were coming to us, and we were recruiting quite heavily in the international markets of Nigerian students. So it's as varied as you might think it is, and it's segmented. It's segmented by undergraduate, postgraduate, nation, and subjects.
Okay, just find is the model of the university based? You need those international students to fund the university.
Of course,
yeah.
Like all universities, actually, we're less dependent on international student income than many of the English universities that you'd have seen some news stories about. We have far fewer international students than many universities of our size on our campuses in Northern Ireland, and as a consequence, we're financially less dependent on that. Having said that, we do work with a partner with campuses that we have in London, Birmingham, and now in Manchester, and we have a large number of international students through that partner, some 8,000 students through there, which gives us a good degree of income, and without that income, we'd absolutely be posting significant deficits. I mean, let's be very clear, higher education in the UK is underfunded. Higher education in Northern Ireland is much worse funded than it is in England. And the divergence point that was in 2011, since then, this university, just from that funding through Department of Economy, ignoring the DOH commissions, is £175 million worse off. Without any non-capping of student numbers, which would have given additional capability to grow income, just that divergence from the funding model from England to Northern Ireland, £175 million difference between that point and today, and that's before you get to the DOH commissions, which are underpriced to about £2,000 a student. That's before you get to Ulster University's no funding received for the additional costs for multi-campus subvention. So in terms of what we managed to achieve, it's including being University of the Year this year, and really punching above our weight in terms of research impact, where we'd be in the top 10% of all UK institutions and so forth, where we perform really well on a whole bunch of metrics in terms of how we support businesses, student satisfaction, and so forth. And we do so with a funding model which is really not suited to what we do. So absolutely, we're dependent on those non-government incomes to be able to deliver for Northern Ireland and more widely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Gary.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Vice-Chancellor, for your comments so far. I attended, obviously, like yourself, the launch of, or the final report launch here at Magee, and paraphrasing slightly from what you said, you were speaking in one of the discussions, and you said that the report sort of pushed you beyond your limits or beyond where you thought you would be. And certainly, having met with you on numerous occasions and heard your contributions over this last number of years, you had always been of the view that under the existing systems or the existing structures, 6,000 students would be achievable. The report is very much welcome. However, there hasn't been, I suppose, in terms of policy change or system change, nothing has changed in that regard. Obviously, there's individuals who are pushing certain directions. That's political direction. So, I suppose my question for you is how have things changed from your comments, say, 2 years ago around the existing systems to now to achieving the 10,000 by 2032?
Thank you. And some things have changed, as you're right. Some things are yet to change. So I don't think it's fair to say that nothing has changed from the 6,000. I've updated that to 6,500 when we got the shared island funding, and that was because we were getting funding for a building, and as a consequence, that liberated us from the need to generate the income to build the building ourselves, and that was sufficient for me to do the sorts of diversions, and it was diversions within the existing MASN cap. So to go to 6,500, which has been a public declaration in the interim period between the 6,000 and the task force, I've gone out and said 6,500, and that would have been worked through by growth in non-regulated postgraduate student growth, but with the campus rebalancing that's in the strategy, which has seen some diminution of the student numbers in Belfast. So that plan was in place pre-task force. Since the task force has come along, I've gone out publicly, and you'll see it's in the document. The forecasts now are at 7,000, and that 7,000 represents the change that has happened. And 500 of that comes from new things that have happened with the task force. So this year we were allocated another 500 Mazen for this campus here. That has meant that we've had to work on our estate, and we're currently acquiring additional estate to be able to put those additional 500 students as they come on stream. So those are the things that have changed. Half predates the task force and is shared island related, and the other half is absolutely a direct consequence of work that's already happened through the task force. You'll see within the graph that's there is that 7,000 that is there. That's the current projection, and it projects all the way up to 2032, actually. That's not to say that it doesn't mean that we need to go further. What it says is, if all that happens is that has already happened, the 7,000 is locked in. What the task force does through all of its asks is layers on top of that until we get to that 2032, and there are considerable amount of capital elements, and then there's a considerable amount of attracting the student elements, which is a combination of, additional courses, new facilities, and the student accommodation piece, which is critical as well.
And we've bottomed out in terms of what Stephen, the infrastructure challenges, the challenges around accommodation, residents, all of that stuff. I suppose what I'm trying to get to in terms of other policy changes that will be required.
Yeah.
What are the next steps that you see from a university perspective?
I mean, for us, the new funding model. I mean, let's be clear. We have just in the last 12 months moved from a university that's making a surplus to a university that's making a deficit. I can't grow a loss-making model, and there needs to be a new settlement. And again, it's in the task force report where Ulster University regards this as a prerequisite for growth. I am not going to grow a loss-making model. I don't think that should be expected. I think that the price for our Department of Health students hasn't been revised for years and years. £2,000 per student less than we get for DFE-funded students. That needs to change. And then we need some, what we've been asking for years, acknowledgement of our multi-campus costs. And they can be quantified and have been quantified. And if we get that, then we can continue on that basis. Now, none of that relates to the fact, well, it's up to you, university, to grow additional income, because we've been doing that. Indeed, since I've been here, I think we've added something like £78 million a year to our bottom line. I mean, that's enormous. That's enormous growth. We've been tremendously successful. But our operational expenditure over the same year has increased by 50%. Just in recent weeks, we've seen national insurance contribution for employers go up. In England, what happened?
What do you see the impact of that being on?
Say again?
What do you see the financial impact of the national insurance increase being on the university?
Well, it's 1% on all of our staff costs.
So could you quantify?
So some millions. There is a cost to it, and again, I don't know off the top of my head. If you want me to stick a little message in, I can get that information to you even while I'm talking here.
Yeah, it'd be useful.
So we do have for every 1% increase, and we have the same with pay increases. Yeah. We've done pay increases year on year, not nearly as much as our trade unions would like, but we have had multi-percentage increases in recent years. I say multi, only 2-3%, those sorts of levels, but for each 1%, we're into seven-figure sums. You add in rates, you add in energy and so forth, and our operational expenditures, software licenses is another one, has gone up by 50%. So we have made a lot more, but our running is not actually even allowing us to stay still. And the price point for what we get per student has not changed. For years we were getting inflationary uplifts on a RPI minus X, where X was an expected efficiency factor. And this was at a level where, as a university, we were already highly efficient. And on the methodologies that are used across the UK, we would have been outperforming in terms of efficiencies, sector norms by some margin. So we don't have a sustainable funding model in Northern Ireland for higher education. So if there is a policy intervention, we know there is a review that's scheduled for this year. And indeed, I've got a meeting with DFE that's in my diary in the coming weeks, and I'll be making that. I can only, ask for that. It's clearly a political decision. But the facts are clear to see. I mean, and if you've seen what's been happening across the rest of the UK in the wider press in terms of universities, and know that Northern Ireland universities are not nearly as well funded per student as English universities are, and you'll see 60% of them are reporting a deficit even on those levels, and they're not constrained in student numbers.
And of course, you touched previously when we met with you and other representatives around the issue of fees, and the reality is you talked about the Irish Sea and the border. It doesn't affect people going the other way. It's only when they're coming back. I think it's something that as a committee, as I say, supportive of the expansion and all of the positive work that you have achieved and your staff has achieved here. But we also have to recognise clearly that without the change in the policy, then obviously that's going to have a severe impact in terms of how this particular report can be achieved. Thank you.
Patrick.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Vice-Chancellor, for your time today. I want to begin by congratulating you on the 2024 Top Achieving University. So congratulations on that again. I know it's a real recognition of, I suppose, your work and the work done by all the staff here. So fantastic achievement. And I suppose within that context, it showcases, firstly, the standard and the quality of teaching and learning here in Magee, but across your campuses as well. And in that context, I want to kind of develop David's point secondly, but I want to begin by actually asking about students in the north, because I know we've had many discussions before and identified, and obviously the task force have identified that the biggest pool of students in terms of growth are students who are from the north but who are going overseas, so who are going to England, Scotland, Wales, further afield. And in that context then, I'm just curious to know what policies you're implementing at the minute to try and retain some of those students. And it's actually, David's point was really well made, but I think it's even going further upstream in terms of that. I can just speak locally, but you obviously do brilliant work in terms of the schools. I know you've great connections with St Mary's in terms of BT, Young Scientist, all these brilliant opportunities to get on the school. Do you quantify, I suppose, the result of that, or do you see a particular uptake from those schools, or what targeted programs can you put on to try and retain students, and I suppose what measurables can you put on that as well?
Yeah, and it's quite complex and mixed. We have quite a dynamic position with those schools. There are schools that even a few years ago wouldn't have been pushing us, if you like, as a destination for their students who now do. Some who perhaps would have sent us 4 students from their sixth form have now gone up to, say, 30. And so we look at that success. I think we've got a bit better in terms of trying to do subject alignment. Indeed, the geography piece that again came out of a conversation with the school principal, who was surprised that our numbers in geography were going down. So we had a thought, well, what could we do about that? And so we looked at the geography programme and we worked with them when we managed to double numbers. So we learn from the schools. So there is the local school piece, and there are still some schools in Northern Ireland that would only be recommending Russell Group universities, and we're not a Russell Group. We know that in England that is now being looked at as something to be done. If there are such things as league tables, or in terms of how many students do you send to Russell Group at universities, I don't think that's particularly helpful, but I would say that would lie as a non-Russell Group institution. So I think that we do need access into schools, but we've also got to do our bit to ensure that we are attractive. The University of the Year status will help with that. Our league table status will help with that. We do really well in a number of league tables, but all of the league tables have different metrics, and we get classified differently. So, we would be the highest ranked university in Northern Ireland in the Guardian League table. We wouldn't in one of the others because of the different measures that are taken. So it's about understanding ourselves and so forth. The big question and the big number change is broadly the market segments, a third to us, a third to Queen's, and a third over the water. There's not that many students in proportion that go south. Some of that, in part, is to do with the way in which the qualifications are counted, and although that's got better recently, it still requires 4 subjects rather than 3, although one is now only needs to be done at AS level, I think. But the third that are going over the water, there are those that will always go and will want to go, and we would understand if someone's got a place at Cambridge, that's where they're going, and why would they? We would. And there are those that perhaps would rather not go over the water, but because of our constrained system, we cannot get a place to do. I think we do need to understand that. I'm not sure I fully understand what that number is. I know that the DFE have done a bit of work to try to understand that number, but it's really difficult to get behind that, because that number doesn't exist anywhere. It's perceptions, and you have to go out and ask people, would you rather, not really thought about it. One of the things I think that we've done that's made a big difference, and it will be really hidden, so I have to go back to 2015 to tell you what happened there and tell you what we didn't do 2 years ago. In 2015, the Department for the Economy was constrained in their budget and passed on those constraints to universities and said, we're going to reduce your funding. As a consequence, both ourselves and Queen's took thousands of students out and said, right, well, you're giving us less money, so we are going to take less students. And so we did. From Ulster University, it took us 7 years to get those numbers back, but the funding was back in 2 years. But the habits were changed. We overly constrained the numbers here. I've met with a vice-chancellor. I nearly said which institution, but it would be unfair. But let me say, I met with a vice-chancellor at a conference who happily described themselves as Northern Ireland's third campus-based institution. I always say campus-based because we have the Open University here who do a great job, and they were in England. And that's because we created that. Now, once you create that habit, and there is a locus of people from Northern Ireland who go to a particular city that you could guess, it creates that culture. That's where people go, or at least a proportion of them. And we created that opportunity for that city in 2015 when we didn't take them here. So when a similar situation emerged a couple of years ago, when there was some austerity, the public position that I took, I said we would not cut our students at Ulster University. We would take the financial hit because I regarded it as an act of vandalism, really, to be able to do that, because we were not going to get them back very quickly. So even though that's hidden as an intervention, we will be considerably better off in terms of student numbers because we took that decision then than we would have been had we said, right, the funding is being cut, so we will cut our intake. But that's the unknown. There are 3 ways to grow here and grow student numbers in Northern Ireland, which for us is here. Through the demographic growth, and we will see perhaps another 4,500 students potentially through demographic growth. There's attracting more from a similar number that go over the water. And then, for Ulster University, and it's interesting, I caught the end of the task force's chairs about, competition, we're in competition with other institutions on the island of Ireland. And it is the case that to get to the 10,000, there will be less students than might have otherwise have been on the other campuses, and that includes our other campuses, potentially, certainly our Belfast campus, on the island of Ireland. That's not to say that the number is less than it is now, because there's the demographic growth and there's the attracting people from over the water. But certainly the market dynamics need to change, and there was some controversy, I think, in the interim task force report when I said that there was a natural ceiling of 7,200 and it got a bit misinterpreted. All that meant was if we did nothing to make us more attracting, the demographic uplift alone, multiplied by our market share, meant that we would naturally get to 7,200. To go beyond that, we needed a better offer that would compete against people going over the water, going south, going to our other campuses. We would have to change some things. We would broadly, if just Mazen came off and we had enough accommodation, we would have got to 7,200 for free, just scaling up the things that we were already doing. That got picked up in terms of that was the limit of our aspiration. It wasn't. What I was saying is we have to do something above and beyond to close that gap between 7,200 and 10,000.
And I suppose just to probe that a bit further, Paul, and thanks for the clarity on that as well, it's obviously there are interventions that you can put at the time of application or around sixth forms and UCAS processes and so on. For example, I know one of the things which we've been working on even, and it's a really practical point, but for students who are coming from Belfast, from Omagh, from other places, trying to get buses to the Duncragan campus where they're not trekking up Duncragan Road with their bag or with a suitcase or whatever, and those sort of practical things that make life that wee bit easier. But there are also the things which you're already doing, as I've mentioned, in school. And in terms of our role as the Economy Committee, is there anything that we can do to support that, to take best practice from what you're doing? And I know you said it's really difficult to find the quantifiables on that and to actually measure, but for instance, to take the likes of St Mary's, who you obviously have a very, very close working relationship with at this campus, and compare them to another comparable school, do you see a difference in that and a growth in that? Or
yeah, it's difficult for me because I think that there's also a legitimate perspective in terms of, students go where they want, not where we want them to go, and student choice is a thing. And I think there is a responsibility on the university in ensuring that they want to come here and not feel that they're being steered towards here. So it's a mixture. What I don't want to happen is for people to be unaware of what we offer. So I think that we have to do just as much as we can within those schools to build those relationships so that people know what a fabulous offer that we have, and the awards that we win and so forth. We need to exploit. And actually, I think Ulster University could be rightfully accused of hiding its light under a bushel for a number of years in terms of the good stuff that we do, and we have got better at that. You'll have seen within this city much more, shall we say, aggressive marketing on buses, you'll see on the TV more frequently Ulster University adverts and so forth, just to raise that awareness of the things that we do, and that's really important. But much of it is word of mouth. Much of it is around, if you like, reputation, brand, and so forth. But the number of people still, and I've been doing this job for 5 years, where I say, amongst the large multi-discipline universities, we would be second in the UK for research impact. And they're like, blimey, who knew? And that's a bit of a phrase, I think, when people come and visit us, blimey, who knew? And when I was at Causeway Coast and Glens Council, I made a promise that we would do what we did on this campus a few weeks ago, to bring the public in and to tour the facilities. And I don't think, until recently, we'd not been doing that sort of thing. And we have to do more of it and spend more time raising that awareness. Because what we don't want to do is to just spend money into marketing and so forth and create a hype. Yep. What you need to do is to go much deeper than that and to demonstrate the quality, to demonstrate that, because that's where sustainability comes from. I think you can move the needle with market, but the sustainable market will come from quality. We have the quality, and we have to showcase the quality. There's only so much quality that you can showcase with a 30-second advert on the telly. You can show some bling, really, some visual bling, but to feel the quality, come in. And I think that's something we're particularly good at. We're a very people-focused university. It's people, place and partnership is our strategy. And all of our open days, that's what the feedback is, that how personable people were. Nothing was too much bother. And I think that is a bit of a USP for us. It's something that we're good at. But yet I think we've been a bit poor in exploiting that USP, in exposing potential students to as many of Ulster University people as we can. And that's what's going to make the difference, whether it's through schools outreach, whether it's through open days in here, whether it's through engagement with industry. It's a people business for sure.
It's just a practical example, and why I keep coming back to that is, I was a primary school teacher before I took on this role, and so many times during particularly science, because it's often science roadshows and stuff like that, and you have practical examples where yourselves were involved, the likes of GMX and Derry.
Yeah.
And when those projects were explored, they were saying to the young people, you do this, and then that's the sort of work that is comparable to what would be done on a daily project in Seagate and this project or something local, and then it sparks that interest in a child to say, well, my mum or daddy works there, somebody in my family works there, and it creates what you're talking about, that network, that connection. And I think that's your USP. That's what's unique, particularly in attracting local students, and it's enhancing that. I'm just conscious of time, but I just want to focus on one point that David raised as well, which is around students who are coming in from overseas, international students in particular. There's obviously some difficulty in terms of bringing, a dependent or a partner for masters, for research associates, postdoctoral training. That's not just something which Ulster University are dealing with. It's across the board. Yeah. And just in terms of that, and it's something that, I don't know, maybe there is an action for our committee to take out of that in terms of writing to the relevant minister, department, etc. Has there been any communication between universities in the north more broadly and the Home Office or any other relevant ministers on that?
But mainly through Universities UK, who would be kind of the body of Vice-Chancellors. And it is a really big thing. It's impacted all universities. In fact, much of the deficits that are being reported is in relation to a collapse in that part of the market, the postgraduate talk market. So it hits us quite hard. My understanding is that I think there is very little chance of that being changed by the current Labour government in terms of dependence, other than PhDs. Where I've not heard that much discussion is in the postdoctoral space, which paradoxically they're not allowed to come with dependents, which seems to be a bit, the argument around PhD students is these are very high-level skills, and thus we allow those, and they will be more mature, so we allow those people to come with dependents. Well, if you think of that for PhD students, it's even more so for the postdocs, yet they're excluded. So I think it's an easier argument to perhaps make, and I'm not sure the degree to which that's been done. But yes, I mean, just for any and all politicians to continue with that debate is really important. I think to bear down on the immigration numbers, it's been seen as low-hanging fruit, and to a certain extent has yielded, because there are many less of those types of students coming forwards. Interestingly, I think we have seen a bit of change, and I think it's in the briefing document, that we're not the only country that's been making it more difficult for international students to come, and as a consequence, where we might have been first, we took a hit, but there's Australia, there's the US, there's Canada, who have implemented their own policies, and thus the playing field has levelled. And if you excuse me as I take my phone out, because I just asked for a bit of an update before I came in today in relation to the specific, if we're seeing any rebound, and we are seeing a bit of rebound in this year. I mean, it's not what we can take to the bank yet, but for September 2025, the applications we're 63% up compared to this time last year. Now, we've not converted those yet. These are just applications. That does include distance learning students. For on-campus only, it's 51% up on last year. And the postgraduate is 72% up from last year. So with new numbers, and it's caveated with these are new numbers, we've not done the analysis yet, it won't land yet for a couple of weeks, but it is looking a bit more positive. We're still below the peak that we would have had before any of this came in, but we are seeing some recovery of the initial shock that happened last year, and we think that compensation is really when students had a choice to go to an English-speaking place to do a degree. They had the choices. Some hostility in the UK will go elsewhere, but that hostility has gone up in the other places. We're not at so much of a disadvantage, and so people are coming here, but they're not bringing dependents. So I haven't looked at the age profile, and as an institution that would be committed to diversity and equality, there's absolutely no doubt that as a policy is prejudicial against women in particular, and as a and older people. And I say older people, I'm only talking non-teenagers here, and as such, from an equity point of view, it's not particularly defensible as a policy.
I totally agree with you, and I think it would be really interesting to actually, once obviously you've time to interrogate that raw data and actually look into that, distill that down. I think it would be really interesting. But I would propose that as a committee we actually write to the relevant minister on that basis and just emphasise our support for the work that you're doing in terms of that accessibility, that inclusion piece, and actually tackling those xenophobic policies which are impacting our universities and our education sphere right across the board. I think that's really important.
Okay.
Thank you.
Diana.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you, Vice-Chancellor, for coming this morning. And I just wanted to ask you a question. It's really something I put to Stephen Kelly regarding, the ambition for new courses to meet future demand. So really looking at how you are seeing the recruitment of specialised or tutors, the excellence you require in tutoring, in teaching skills, to meet the robotics, the optoelectronics and, the digital kind of robotic and AI courses that you're offering. Do you see recruitment of those tutors coming from within Northern Ireland, from the UK, Ireland, or are you satisfied there is a supply of sufficiently trained tutors to deliver for you?
I think there will be. I think we have to attract them. I think in many ways attracting them from other universities is a bit more straightforward than it is from attracting from industry, because in certain areas, especially IT-specific ones, salaries of those people that they command in industry is really, really quite high. So when you want something very industry-specific. But if you're looking for people who are already delivering similar subjects at other universities, I think we've been quite successful in getting really good appointments. And that's because, we all know living in Northern Ireland is a nice experience. People come and they think we've got really something to sell in that regard. As an employer of choice, I think Ulster University is quite strong in that regard. We're a values-driven institution. I think the word has gotten out in relation to that. We have quite good connections and quite good reputations as being a good employer. Now, you're right. The more specific that the programme becomes, the narrower the pool is to look at those. But we haven't had really any significant issues in those areas. But for certain niche areas in the postgraduate space, it's inevitable you have to cast your net wide. But as a university, we will always do so internationally. And I sit on recruitment panels pretty regularly. I would say, I think I can even safely say always, we would get an international field of applicants.
Okay, thank you.
Kate?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Vice-Chancellor. Thanks for having us. And congratulations for University of the Year. I also saw this week that you are offering free mini MBAs to women returning to work on this campus, which I think speaks to your values. And in kind of talking about widening participation, the skills barometer for 2023 identified the need for more level 2, 3 and 4 skills, and I just wondered what sort of work or what work the university does with FE to kind of broaden that kind of skills base.
Yeah, well, we work. There's a tertiary skills cluster, so the skills piece is seen as being joined up. We work with FE in the talk space, not so much in the research space for obvious reasons. We try to ensure that there's articulation while also understanding that there's step-off before coming to university. The majority of the foundation degrees in Northern Ireland will be validated by Ulster University, and we would be the partner, and we would provide progression routes for them. Only about 10% of those progress to us. We shouldn't be surprised at that, because the foundation degree is set up to be work-based. And have a legitimate aim of going into employment. Level 4, of course, is taught in FE and taught by us. It's an overlapping level. They'll also teach some level 5 as well, where broadly, 6 will be done with us, but increasingly the Open University is also working with colleges to supply level 6. And it's an interesting thing about this, I think, false dichotomy between skills and higher education, like our higher education doesn't include any skills. You know, my old discipline, diagnostic radiography, it's a degree. Of course, it's full of skills. It's full of employment placements. And we have at any one time about 2,500 students who are on placements. And our degrees are largely vocationally related. We do have some programmes that aren't specifically vocationally related. I don't think we could say English literature was a vocation in and of itself. But there are plenty of people who you know, the employability of English literature is really high. But most of our programmes are in a particular discipline that are really skills-based. And that's why, you know, it's so expensive to run all these campuses. It's full of labs and practical equipment and so forth, teaching people skills. But sometimes I think that people feel there's this dichotomy: skills equals colleges and universities do something else. It's not the case.
You had a wonderful ambassador for the university who came to the economy committee when we were looking at apprenticeships. And so he does his apprenticeship in, I think it was cybersecurity perhaps, and then he's in Ulster one day a week. And yeah, I mean, I think kind of the idea of studying and how you get those skills is really changing. And what I was interested when Stephen Kelly was talking was about how the Magee expansion is creating new courses, and you talked about using previous data for student places. But in terms of that academic planning, and you mentioned geography as an example, but how do you do that forecasting, and how do you understand what new courses are needed? And
they're two quite separate things, actually. Our academic planning generally is about the cycle is about looking at the provision that we have and trying to predict and plan the distribution of our student numbers within our cap across a range of programmes. So it doesn't include a great deal outside of the task force and what we're doing here. It doesn't include a great deal of new programmes. We have some churn, some that have fallen away, some that will have some name changes, some that will be redesigned. Redesign happens fairly regularly, and some new programmes that come on as new disciplines. You know, regulatory technology is a new one that we would look at. Financial technology is something that we would, or AI is something that we already do, but we weren't doing 5 years ago. So, you know, the world changes, and we reflect that. When we look at the task force we're looking here, that's quite different to business as usual. This is about structured growth, and it's about going beyond that 7,200 to say, if we only scaled up and did our normal academic planning, how many students could we recruit onto, you know, our drama programme here? What does that mean with a demographic uplift? But you're only going to get so many. So here, it's a different sort of academic planning where we are now seeing what new programmes do we need to bring to this campus to actually grow the absolute numbers. And for that, we're not looking at our own data, because that will only get us up to the 7.2. We're looking at the data of other places. We're looking at what is it that students want to do, what is it that they're studying. If we look at the data in terms of what are the most popular programmes in the UK and Ireland, what is it that students are doing that we're not doing? Perhaps we should do some of those. And that has informed some of the things that we're doing, together with what is it that industries want. I hope this doesn't sound like I'm going to speak ill of politicians.
Fine.
I think they're interesting to do in this country. But I think that politicians, when they're thinking about demand, don't see demand as one thing. Within a university, we see it as two things. There's certainly the demand for skills, which comes from industry, but just because industry wants more computer scientists doesn't mean more students want to do computer science. And for me, having to balance the books and build to 10,000 students, I've really got to look to this side. What is it that people want to come and do? Now, we can do exactly as Podrick says, get into the schools and get people interested in the things that we know that industry will need in Seagate and so forth, to try to build our own pipeline and ensure that that pipeline is synergistic with what industry needs. Unfortunately, what students wish to do and what industry want them to do are two different things. You know? A lot of students want to do psychology, there aren't many interests. There aren't as many industries out there who say what we need is more psychologists. That's not to say that psychologists don't find their way into those places, but you wouldn't find it's very different for say, engineering, where it would go the other way and say we need more engineers, but the number of school children who are saying we wish to do engineering is in the other direction. So I've always got to balance those two, and as politicians who certainly in Northern Ireland, where we are considerably funded by the public sector, not entirely, but considerably funded by the public sector, feel if we're funding universities, we wish them to be able to deliver the skills for our industries so our economy can thrive. But all of that steps aside for, we have young people who wish to go to university to do a particular subject. And so we have to look at that in terms. So it's always a balance between the two. But that's part of our strategy as well, that we would be a broad-based university, offering what people want to do and what people need to do. That will mean we'll take a loss on some of the things that we need to run this for industry, but actually we're never going to get enough people on to make it pay its way, but it's really important for the economy. We'll do some of that, but it can't be all of that.
It's really interesting, and I studied social anthropology, so I'm one of those people. I'm not sure really why and how it led me to this, but when you're talking about the Maslin cap, and having worked with students before, the student voice was always very clear that removal of the Maslin cap entailed an increase in fees, and that's what they were fearful of. Yeah. Would you say then changes to the Maslin cap actually facilitates then more choice for students if so much of the funding determines kind of what courses? I guess what I want to be convinced, because I know the universities all say that changes to Maslin, and the minister has implied that maybe removal of ROI students from the Maslin cap is something that he would do. I'm not sure how far that will actually go, and I think it's unlikely it will be what the universities would advocate for. But can you make the case that the removal or change to the Maslin cap is in the students' best interest? Because the student voice has always been quite opposed to that, in my experience.
Yes, but whenever I talk about this, I then get hauled over the coals and misrepresented. So,
okay.
And I'm aware that there's a microphone right here.
Okay.
So there are a number of ramifications in terms of what we do in Northern Ireland in having. We only have a Maslin cap to control costs to Northern Ireland. That's why we have a cap. Because half of the fee broadly is being paid by the state and half goes to the student loan company. The state can only afford so much, so that introduces the cap. So the cap is in no one's interest. If no one was paying, there would be no cap. But someone is paying, and so there is a cap. If Northern Ireland Government, Department of the Economy, did not have to pay, they would not have to limit the number of places. That would then mean that students, theoretically, are liable for the cost. That's what students fear. However, there is no link at all between fees and affordability for students. And this is where I get in deep water, because people think that's a silly thing to say. But there really isn't. Students do not pay fees. If you go to university now, you don't get a bill for fees that you have to pay. The entity that pays for it is the student loans company. Now, some people might elect to pay fees, but I had a son going to university. I certainly wasn't going to pay his fees. There was this system, and the system is students don't pay fees.
There's your headline.
Graduates are subject to, technically, it's an income contingent future tax liability.
Yes, it doesn't impact ability to get a mortgage or anything.
And nor do most students end up paying it back. The real thing, if you pick up the HEPI report, what you see is, even if it were to reduce fees to zero for students, it would make no impact at all on them. Okay. Because they are still having a student loan for their living expenses, and by the time they get to the end of the period, they still haven't paid back what they borrowed for their living expenses. So the amount of the student fee above it becomes immaterial, because they still require a loan for the living experiences. But because it's all constrained, so if I were to want to sell this I know the Minister has taken it off the table, but I do need to give my rationale for it. Why you asked me the question, how I think it can favour students. As we go forwards with the funding model, there's only so much money. And I would really think that I would at least wish to consider DFE paying less to universities. Ian Greer, if he was here now, would hit me around the head. So that the student loans company, let's say put it that way, would pay more, perhaps much more, because we need more money per student anyway. That has no impact on student affordability for the mechanisms that I've just said. But DFE have now saved a whole bunch of money. Now, what can you do with that money that's saved that's in students' interest? Well, look at the student hardship that we have now. You could give more grants to widen participation. You could give, if you wanted to do something specifically in Magee, you could give housing bursaries. There are things that you could do with that money that's in students' interest in the here and now without actually impacting on student affordability, because the evidence shows it makes no difference because the student's loan company picks it up. You only pay, it's fixed. What you pay back does not relate to what you owe. It relates to what you earn. It's independent of how much you owe. So we can theoretically increase that allocation through the student loans company, and that then enables DFE to be able to do more things instead of just giving half the money to university. So I can honestly say, if I was a student, I would be campaigning for that. But, you know, I get asked these questions, and the academic in me feels I've got to give a thesis back to it. But then I get hauled over the car.
I'm not trying to catch you out. I'm genuinely
interested. But some people do that.
in
Oh, Bartholomew wants to do these with fees. I'm not saying that. I actually said when that was put to me, if we just increase the fees without doing anything else, that would be a disaster. Why would you do it? But what I'm saying is there's a number of things that you could do with the money, and at the moment we're not optimising that money to make a difference to what's in students' pockets now. We could, and it's a legitimate question. So yeah, you could sell it to students, but before you get to that, the language has to change. You know, to call it a student loan when it's actually an income contingent future tax liability is not helpful. To talk about fees and student fees when actually it's a graduate contribution into a system that allowed you to go to university. We need to spend some years in the language before even people are ready to think. Because at the moment, it just feels like it's all about debt.
Yeah, it's
and it isn't
very
really.
loaded. Yeah. Okay.
And I'd have said this here, and someone will go over those words. And the best thing people could do is look at Martin Lewis's website, who has a bit of a paragraph on it, and spells it all out in much clearer terms than I've done here. And the Happy report that came out midway through last year, I think, is really useful in that regard. Just don't take my word for it. I think people think that when I say these things that it's about more money for university. I said at the beginning of this, universities need more money. That's very clear. That's completely separate from my arguments where I'm saying we've got X number of pounds. The ratio that ends up in the students' pockets to help them do higher education now also needs to be bolstered, and that should be part of the equation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Kate, and finally, Sinead.
Okay. Thank you, Paul, and congratulations on the University of the Year. And I think that has, a lot of attraction outside of Northern Ireland as well. And because I'm very concerned about the international students, because it could actually turn around that it'll make other universities on the mainland much more competitive, trying to get our students here in order to make up their deficits as well. So there's a threat all around in relation to that. I'm just getting back here to this campus. Can you just give us a breakdown of student numbers today, their mode, their level, and areas of academic growth that we're experiencing currently here? And then the next part of the question is, can you give us the status of your acquirements of lands, recent lands purchases, and what is your hope for them, and then the status of perhaps new builds, and when you're looking at that campus capacity building, and when we will see that and how that will impact on your numbers next year.
Blimey. Okay. Let me refer to the document. I know the top number is 5,844, and you'll see the breakdown that the vast majority of that is full time, and a big percent of that is Maslin. Now, there is quite a lot of interest in everybody talking about full time. I have to say, if what we did is only use the opportunities to grow full time, it certainly wouldn't be great for the economy. The part time. Full-time undergraduate, postgraduate and part-time, and there's a big overlap between postgraduate and part-time, is absolutely critical to the economy for skills uplift and so forth. Companies wishing to upskill their workforce is really a big part of what universities should be doing. So I'm never a fan of just saying it's all about full-time undergraduate. It isn't, and it shouldn't be. Paradoxically, here on this campus, it's more about full-time undergraduate than it is on our other campuses, but that's really because of the number of the healthcare professions that we have here that tend to be taught in that mode. So to break that down, 4,932 full-time undergraduate, 311 full-time graduate taught, 74 full-time graduate research, 261 part-time undergraduate, 240 part-time graduate taught, and 26 part-time graduate research, and that's the add up to the 5,844. In terms of our progression there going forwards, it's interesting. I think we've been and these numbers are still kind of predictive. People will continue to come in through the year and so forth, but that's pretty much where our projection is. I think I went on record, certainly within the institution, thinking it would be 5,810, and that's not far off. My colleague Paul Seawright was reporting a little bit higher, and around about 5,900, and we're kind of between the two there. I think the growth that we would see going forwards for next year, it's in the task force report, and I think that we are. We have outperformed what we were projecting this year, even when the task force report was written, of 5,728, and we're predicting 6,286 for this coming year. Some of that is for the new programs that we've put in. You get 3 years worth, so and the methodologies as well. The recruitment practices that we did in terms of expanding the School of Law here have got 1 more year to go of growth. After that, we still have to do that year after year, but actually to replace the 3rd year that's now gone away, we need to do the same to recruit into the 1st year. So I don't think we're going to be far off that projection in terms of the roll through for 25, 26. We are predicting to get, by the time we get to 26, 27, at 6,500, and that plateaus then for a couple of years. It plateaus for a couple of years because we are full. We're full now. We can only accommodate up to, even the 6,200 that we would have plus this coming year, because we're about to acquire a property which we would hope to refit before September to accommodate that growth even for next year. There's then a bit more refurbishment work that can be done in that to accommodate the 6,500. Once we get to 6,500, you see the numbers plateau because we've got nowhere else to put them. The next growth then is the 7,000. When I was talking to Gary earlier about the shared island unit coming on, which then is the additional 500 that comes in. There might be, depending on the design and the subject mix that goes in, we might get a few more out of that, and then we have to wait until the next building comes on. So there isn't the notion that the growth at this campus is ever going to be a straight line. It's always going to be stepped, and when a building comes online, we don't go up because we don't go up vertically because you don't get all 3 years at once, your first year and your second year. So it goes up in each step of a new building has 3 steps of new programme, first year, new programme, first and second year, new programme, first, second, third year, and then you get to the full capacity of that new programme's going on. So it's quite steppy as we go forward. But I think the graph that's put into the task force report, and I think it goes under figure 2, demonstrates that quite well. And then we bring subjects on in a variety of ways. You'd have seen, hopefully, there was some publicity yesterday that we have a really popular programme in sports exercise science that we're just launching now for 2025. It's a programme that we get more applicants than we have places for on our Belfast programme, so we are duplicating. That's worked really. Oh, this is normal. It's a Wednesday, isn't it? Must be 1:05. It's 11 minutes past 1. We'll just wait for that to go before. Good. That's worked really well for us because where we've got programmes that we are duplicating, and that's a strategy that we're using on this campus, duplicating popular programmes where we know there's an existing pipeline of students who want to do it, because that's half the job. We'll just then do it in another place. And we did find, when I was responding to you David, about the health, when we've moved health sciences to here, what we found was we opened up a new demographic in the northwest that didn't exist. So when you've already got your existing pipeline and you open it elsewhere, there are some people who, let's be clear, if we offer a programme at the moment in Belfast and you're commuting to Belfast from Newcastle and you're going to continue to commute, it's a rather different proposition to come up to Derry, Londonderry than it would have been. So we will lose some students. Not everybody's going to take that opportunity. But then we gain a bunch of people who are over in the Donegal region, and it's a balance between the two. We've found that we can translate probably about half the number of excess applicants by doing that duplication. We're doing so and have just done so in sport, and we keep an eye on all of our applications. Wherever we see viability for a programme, the other things that we're doing is bringing on programmes where we know what are they going to over the water that we don't do. We need to develop that capacity here. Now, of course, we're a university, and developing capacity doesn't just mean we develop the teaching capacity. Our teaching is underpinned by research, so we also have to develop the research capacity and the research facilities. So one of the things that students go to do is natural sciences, and we would love to do natural sciences here. That will mean physics labs and so forth, and that then means that the sorts of real estate that we have to build all goes into the plan. So it's a mixed approach to that growth, and we continue to chip away at that as we continue to do it. Broadly, though, the big change with working through, who I think has become a really strong partner in DFE, and they know that this is my position, I'm largely ignoring Mazen for this campus. So we've been given additional Mazen. If we had an opportunity to over-recruit from the additional Mazen, DFE, I'm not saying anything that I'm going to get in trouble for. If we can recruit more, and we've got the space for them, more than additional Mazen that has been allocated, I will take them. I'll either get funded for them or I won't. And if I'm not, I'm probably not going to do it again next year, and there's a conversation to be had about how serious are we about this. But because I think we are serious, we will take those opportunities. But of course, the money that's allocated, that goes in, has also got to go into all the budget rounds and declared and so forth, and it's not always predictable. I don't mind taking a risk on behalf of everybody, and we will over-recruit, and if we're underfunded but it's then built in and it comes later, that's also okay for us. We got some retrospective funding this year for over-recruitment beyond Mazen that I did last year. So there's that proof in principle has already happened, and that was really helpful. So I took a risk, and we went 150 over than we should have done. And then this year, when we got the additional Mazen allocation, they counted the 150 that we'd already taken, and then we topped it up with the others. And that's really helpful because it allows us to just say, let's grow as we can, because I can have confidence that the funding will follow because of all the work that we're doing together to do just that. So the buildings will be built just as soon as we can. We are in the process of acquiring. Legal documents have not yet been signed. I don't like to declare much of that because when we start saying we're looking at properties, it distorts the market and it makes sellers twitchy. So we have to have discretion about that. But I'm content that we will be able to do the growth, and I'm much more content than I thought I would be able to be even 3 months ago. So I think land acquisitions is going well. Securing the £404 million to build the buildings on the land is still an unknown quantity, and it's for colleagues around this table to be party to. But if all of that comes, we will have a campus that's compatible with 10,000 students, and then we get into the schools liaison and the marketing piece, and we see how we can fill it up. Is it challenging? Yes. Have we done it before? No. Not to the, do we have a crystal ball? No. But it's about what I said to the chair earlier. You know, will we be confident? What we'll be confident is if we do all these things, we'll have given ourselves the best possible chance. We won't be able to say, well, if only we had. And that's what we need to get to a point to say. We won't be saying, if only we had done that. No, we've done everything, and we're at the maximum number we possibly could be. And if are people going to jump up and down, if that's 9,989 or it's 11,102, we don't know what those numbers will be, but we can know we've done all the things that we were asked to do, we've done them together, and we gave it a best shot. And then on the bounce of that, I've never been so optimistic, because when Gary, you were asking about, you know, I was going out and saying 6,000. I always said that within the current operating environment. Well, the operating environment has changed. And that's what we've all been asking for. And you know, credit to everybody involved that the operating environment has changed, but we need it to continue to change.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, with that, I think that seems like a good positivity to end this evidence session. Vice Chancellor, thank you very much indeed for your representation. Again, on behalf of the committee, congratulations on your recent award. It's been on cinemas, online, and on buses, so it's good to see that.
I'm glad you noticed.
Yeah. Everywhere, so congratulations.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the opportunity.
No, thank you. And sorry, if you do get that figure, it's just there's a debate on the Assembly on Monday on the impact of national insurance contribution rises.
Yeah, I can get you that figure exactly, because it's a percentage.
Yes.
It will be around about £1 million, I think, but I'll check.
Perfect. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you.
Yes, Peter.
So, members of the committee consent to write to Ulster University, just formally seeking that information on national insurance, also about the percentage of the Republic of Ireland or Donegal students that they're expecting in the future. Also, perhaps seeking a further breakdown in the student projections to 2032 and beyond, who they are, what they anticipate they may be studying, and also seeking further information on the impact of immigration rules on new applications, and additionally writing to Immigration Minister indicating the committee's concerns about the impact of immigration rules on applications to UU and the viability of universities in Northland.
Great.
I just think we should see clarity on exactly who to write to in that. I would assume it would be the Home Office, but if there's a specific person within.
Minister for Immigration.
There is Seema Malhotra, is the Parliamentary Under-Secretary, but okay then, I'll go with that one.
It's just if the university have already been in contact with somebody, we want to make sure it's that one central point of contact rather than
ask them.
Okay, all great. Item 8, members, Great British Energy Bill legislative consent. Members will be aware that the committee will now receive an oral briefing from the Department in relation to the devolved aspects of the Great British Energy Bill. This session will be subsequently recorded by Hansard and refer members to page 212, 213 and 217 of their packs. We're delighted to welcome back Anne-Marie and to Paul, and hand over to you now at this stage.
Thank you for this opportunity to brief the committee on the current work on the legislative consent memorandum in relation to the Great British Energy Bill. You may recall that the Minister wrote to the committee on the 16th of September 2024 and shared a copy of the draft legislation. And the Great British Energy Bill was announced as part of the King's Speech in July 24, following the formation of the Labour government. The bill would establish Great British Energy as a new government-owned clean energy company. The intention is for the company to support the creation of jobs by investing in clean energy, also by reducing the UK's dependence on fossil fuels. It will aim to help defossilise energy and drive down the UK's energy costs and ensure long-term energy security. So the company will operate on a UK-wide basis. Therefore, as energy policy is devolved to Northern Ireland and is a responsibility of the Minister for the Economy, the UK bill triggers the legislative consent process. So in terms of the purpose of this new company, the founding statement of GB Energy states that it will focus on investing in energy projects alongside the private sector to help get them off the ground, and helping projects through the various development stages to speed up the time that, for them to get to delivery. supporting local energy generation projects by working with local communities and local councils, etc., and also building supply chains to boost energy independence and create jobs. While recognising the opportunities that such a company can provide in supporting the executive's energy strategy by giving Northern Ireland businesses and communities access to share of the 8.3 billion that the Labour government has promised for GB Energy, it's also important to ensure that the new company will operate in Northern Ireland in a way that respects our devolved position and aligns with the Executive's current and future energy priorities. In this letter, the Minister advised that at that time there was insufficient detail available to make an effective assessment of how the bill would impact on the devolved sphere. So since then, the Minister has met on several occasions with the DESNZ Secretary of State and other GB ministers to discuss the assurances that were required in advance of the detailed work that will come on how GB Energy will deliver on this purpose. So that engagement has led to the draft amendment to Clause 5 of the bill. That's included in the written briefing. Clause 5 relates to a statement of strategic priorities for Great British Energy that the DESNZ Secretary of State will lay before Parliament. And the draft amendment that's been secured means that these strategic priorities and any revisions now require the consent of the Department for the Economy and the other devolved administrations on any matters that fall within the devolved competence. So given this amendment, the Minister is now engaging with his executive colleagues on a potential recommendation that Great British Energy should extend to Northern Ireland. And we expect that the Executive will consider this very soon, and we would very much welcome the Committee's views to inform a potential debate in the Assembly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne-Marie, and that's very useful. So just from me, obviously in a personal capacity, very supportive that the Minister gets this done as soon as possible. So have we got a timetable as when this will likely be going to go on the agenda for the Executive?
It's out. We're hoping the Executive will accept it. Basically, it's there ready for them to accept. We're hoping that will be very, very shortly. And at that point, if they're happy with it, it will go to an Assembly debate and vote. We want to try and get it through as quickly as possible because the bill has gone through on the GB side. It's just gone through the committee process and it's now headed towards the third reading. So they would like to get this through that and then to royal consent so that they can actually have the company operational and starting to develop the specific detailed processes of how they'll deliver that purpose.
So this is out with executive ministers currently for comment and then it'll be tabled for approval, right? So it hasn't been tabled for an executive meeting yet?
It has been tabled, but it hasn't been taken.
Made it to the agenda yet? Okay, fair enough. Okay, David.
Yeah, just a couple of questions around this. I suppose our energy policy, we're on an island, but we're interconnected with the British Isle, if you like, separate. But so I get that. The bit that is just how it interfaces with the devolved our policy separately. I understand how Scotland and Wales as devolved units on an island there is effectively isn't as devolved as what we are. That's the bit, and there isn't a lot of information on how that functions moving forward, and that's the not concerns, the wrong word, but the questions I would have would be around is how that works, how you come to storage, how does storage work in Northern Ireland, but I understand how in England, Scotland, Wales as a unit, which is all connected, you would be able to have a storage facility there, but how that would work here, it's how, so in practice is my question rather than the principle of it, of how this will function.
Yes, yeah. I agree. That's exactly the question that was being asked, was because there is this bill is to establish the company. Yeah. It doesn't give very much information on how it will actually do its work. Then because the GB system is separate and different in lots of ways to our system,
that was the concern that was raised, and that's why we felt, and the Minister felt very strongly, that we needed this consent to the strategic direction given to the company, so that if there was something which impinged on our system differently, that we would be able to actually make that case and say that direction that you're giving this company does not work for Northern Ireland, and we would have people to have that conversation. It wouldn't be something that would happen without us, and that we are having regular meetings with the DESNES team who are setting up this company, and they have been very reassuring in terms of the fact that this company is to be an operational company. It's not stepping into the policy space at all, and that they have no intention for this company to come in and start changing the way we do things or changing our priorities. It's to work with our priorities, and so our concern is to make sure that whatever money is available, that our local businesses and communities get access to it, are able to apply for it and benefit from support for their projects. And this draft amendment is what reassures us that that our special needs, being part of an island separate from the GB island, that we'll be able to have that taken into account.
Yeah. Okay. No, it's the operational bit. It's not the principle. The principle absolutely get of trying to get involved and get moving on it. Totally. It's just how operationally why that we don't get left kind of out, if you like, or because the main sort of Scotland and Wales as a unit takes. But of that 8.5 billion or whatever it was, is that then going to be in ratio again to Northern Ireland, or is that just like we're going to have 8 billion over here and there's a token to, or is
the way it's going to be set up is in terms of supporting projects.
Yeah.
So it's projects that are able to apply for the funding, that will be direct support. What we're trying to do as policymakers is ensure that whatever criteria are set for the support for those projects enables our people in our system to basically have a fair opportunity to bid for that, and that's what we're doing in our interaction, is making sure that they're aware of any differences that we have and any differences that our particular contracts might be. There would be, for example, would probably be quite a bit smaller, a lot of them.
Yeah.
So that sort of thing, we're trying to ensure that those are built into the operational aspect. But this, we don't know how it's going to operate, and we don't know how they're going to deliver the money. These are the questions that we're continuing to ask. They have not worked that through yet, and this is part of the problem, and that's why we felt we had to have that consent aspect in the legislation. If the legislation had contained all those kind of details, we would have been a lot more confident about saying it's fine the way it is. But we just need to have that facts, that ability to say this doesn't work for us. Can we look at doing this in some way that does? So absolutely take your point on board, and that is the issue, and that's the one we've sought to address with this amendment, is when we get to operational, how does it operate to the benefit of our people as well?
Yeah, it's a benefit of here. It's making sure we're at advantage in the operational piece. But here, thank you.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thanks for. I know it's difficult to get clarity because by nature there isn't clarity around it. So I do have a couple of questions. I appreciate some of them you'll be able to answer, and some of them there probably isn't the detail yet on. But obviously we would need that to be across it really. First one really is around just building on David's point around the devolution, and I suppose, you know, if they have rights over the seabed and the seabed's along the Irish Sea and that's being used for offshore energy, how does that respect devolution? Like where is the input from devolved government for that? So I don't know if any broader conversations have been had on that already.
I think part of the seabed, I think the way the legislation works, I can't remember the exact distance, it might be 5 miles or something like that, we can come back and confirm that, is within the landmass of Northern Ireland, is my understanding on that. It's whenever you go out beyond that, that would be outside our jurisdiction. So I don't have the details, but certainly we can come back and provide
detailing around that?
That would be great if you could come back and write on that, actually. I suppose specifically what I want to know is how can GB Energy respect evolution if it has the rights over the seabed along the Irish Sea for offshore energy. So that's specifically, that's the point, if that could be clarified. Second point then is just around, there's obviously an established and you know this better than I do, an established All Ireland electricity market. So the role of EirGrid, the role of Sony, has either of these bodies even been consulted on this proposal?
At this point, the legislation is just to set up the company, and I absolutely accept your point that these bodies will have concerns and they'll have questions, and because there are no answers on how these things will operate, my understanding is that they haven't been consulted at this point. Our role as policymakers is to ensure that when it gets to that stage, that those concerns are being fed in, and that we're doing that. And I'm told that consultation, a very big stakeholder engagement programme will be carried out, and obviously we'll be interested in that, but also all of those other companies as well. The thing to remember is this company is an operational company to help get projects off the ground. It's not supposed to go in and change the basis on which those projects work or the basis on which energy is actually used or that sort of thing. So it's basically to get in there and support getting the projects happening quickly.
No, absolutely. And I suppose it's just getting that clarity is essential to me to ensure I don't think we can have a retrospective process where we're trying to go through and undo something in legislation. So it's even, in terms of oversight, is there any local oversight by the local utility regulator?
No, there isn't any oversight because this is a standalone company which will operate in accordance with the company's regulations and all of that. The direction from the Secretary of State is the strategic direction, and that will be their steer, and on that basis they will develop their plans, and we will be very interested in seeing what those plans are. But from our perspective, it's the strategic steer that's important, because that will set their course, and basically we will want to make sure that we're fully represented and we feed those issues in, and if and when it ever came to a situation where, for example, if Ofgem were involved, we would make sure that the utility regulator was involved. So that's our role, and we're very aware of that, and we are very linked in. We're having very regular meetings with the team, and the company itself will be established in Scotland, and a chief executive has been appointed, Jürgen Meyer, and I think at that point, whenever this company is established, that he will then be the person that we'll be able to ask those questions of. What are your plans for doing this, and how are you going to actually make sure that all these things are taken account of? So I agree that there are lots and lots of questions, and at this point we can't answer them because business can't answer them yet, and we'll have to see how it goes. But we are more comfortable, and the Minister is more comfortable, that with this consent built in rather than consult, that we are better protected.
Yeah, I think that's essential, and I suppose it's that, how does that form part of the legislative basis rather than the policy basis? Because obviously it's very easy for anybody to move out or change policy, but unless that's enshrined in legislation, it's going to be very difficult for that compel or to compel the company to do any of this. So just final point is just around the nuclear power. So it's just to see, would the executive have any rights over the installation of nuclear power if it was proposed, and obviously that's theoretical. If that was to be proposed by GB Energy as a publicly owned company, would the executive have any say in that, rights in that, or what?
GB Energy does have one of their purposes is in terms of nuclear energy, and the reason why I didn't mention that is because nuclear is already a reserved matter. So we, as a region, don't have that reserve devolved to us. At this stage, we have not been told of any plans for that to come to Northern Ireland. But as it stands, because it's a reserved matter, it doesn't change that for us.
Okay, thanks. And those were really sort of, there's not a lot of clarity already, and it must make your job extremely difficult, but it's just obviously the concerns in looking at it overview. So I really appreciate your answers. Thank you.
And as we get more information, we're more than happy to come back and actually share that.
It's brilliant. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I suppose I'm going to ask a question that I probably know that you can't answer either. But this all feels like and sounds a bit like the Levelling Up initiative in the Conservative government, which didn't serve us well at all. It became a competitive business and competitive with community and voluntary organisations, even here in Northern Ireland, and it just didn't work out at all. And I'd be afraid that this organisation will open a competitive part that would be a disadvantage to our businesses and organisations here. So that's just one concern that I have, because that's what it feels like. And the other, is there any suggestion at all that that we would be able to exercise agency over where the funding is allocated, even in a competitive basis, if that was the kind of model that they were working towards?
That's a very interesting question, and I have to say that's something we will definitely take on board whenever we're working in with DESNES, because we don't know quite how the funding will be allocated, whether it's going to be direct funding through schemes to projects, or whether there's going to be any role for the executive in actually steering some of that, and that's where potentially we'll be able to feed into the strategic priorities, but we don't know the detail of that yet, because those strategic priorities, that statement hasn't been drafted by the Secretary of State yet, so we haven't seen such a statement. All we know now is that when it is drafted, we'll be consulted and we'll be allowed to consent on it. That's something we will definitely, when we're talking about how the money might be allocated and how things might be prioritised, that's definitely something we could feed in to try and get more information on that kind of thing. Okay.
Well, thank you for the information that you've provided and that you're able to provide at this stage. So thank you very much indeed for your time.
So, it's like department seeking clarity and issues for guidance on whether we should produce a report or we should.
Okay, members, so we will follow up with the department just in terms of some of the issues raised there, and also try and seek some clarity in relation to timetabling of this and when we're likely to come to the executive, because obviously if it does get approved at the executive, then this committee will have a reporting role to play in that. Anything you want to add at that, Peter?
No, just that, Chairperson, that as officials indicated, it's got to get through Westminster by the end of January, so there would be a plenary debate in the Assembly before that. Does the committee need to produce a report or not? I think, based on what they've said in the submission, which hasn't gone through the executive yet, no, we don't. But if members are content, I'll have a little chat with Business Office and just make sure they agree. But if you're finding it controversial, whether we don't have to produce a report or not, if members want, I can produce one anyway to cover some of the issues if you're finding it controversial. But in the meantime, I'll write to the department and ask for a really quick answer.
Content?
Agreed.
Yeah. Great. Okay. Item 9 then, members. The department has laid a statutory rule, SR 2024-216, the Public Interest Disclosure Prescribed Persons Amendment Order Northern Ireland 2024. The clerk has provided a covering note on this statutory rule at page 241. This rule will be subject to negative resolution and will come into operation on the 25th of February 2025. The Public Interest Disclosure Northern Ireland Order 1998 gives protections to whistleblowers who raise concerns by making a protected disclosure about dangerous or illegal activity that they are aware of in the workplace. This statutory rule updates the parent legislation to make clear that matters relating to the Digital Markets, Competition and Consumers Act 2024 are covered by the entry in the schedule for the Competition and Markets Authority, and that matters relating to the Communications Act 2003 and Online Safety Act 2003 are covered by the entry for the Office for Communications, i.e. Ofcom. The committee considered the related SL1 at its meeting on the 13th of November and had no objections. The lead rule is understood to not deviate from the original plan. Do members have any issues or questions they wish to raise at this stage? If not, are the committee content to agree that the Committee for the Economy has considered SR 2024-216, the Public Interest Disclosure Prescribed Persons Amendment Order, Northern Ireland 2024, and subject to the report of the Examiner of Statutory Rules, has no objection to this rule. Is that agreed, members?
Agreed.
Okay. Then move to item 10, and Peter's going to use his excellent skills to dispose of these in rapid.
So, members, there's a lot of correspondence here. I'll point out a couple of them to you, if that's okay. Item 2 at page 256, right, this is what members were just talking about. This is around the Offshore Renewable Energy Action Plan. This was expected to be published a while ago, along with a consultation on strategic environmental assessment and the habitats regulation assessment. This is all offshore renewable energy, doing stuff on the continental shelf, wind farms, etc., out at sea and all that good stuff. This has been delayed as the department is working through spatial issues with the Ministry of Defence. So I don't know what that means, but this is we've been waiting for this for a while, and I know members are interested in it. So just to note, because I don't think there's anything further. But again, this is, I think, around the Crown Estate and what we do with the offshore part of the Northern Ireland landmass, as we just heard. Okay, if that's for members content to note, Chairperson.
Agreed, members. Yep.
Agreed,
Yeah. Okay, so items 3 and 4 we'll consider together. These are all about the Utility Regulator Decarbonisation Bill. Got a briefing from the department. I think the bill is probably imminent. The bill, what it does is it allows the utility regulator to give advice to the Department for the Economy about decarbonisation and such like. What the department is writing back and saying, look, the utility regulator previously told the committee that no, they wanted a bigger bill than that. The department has written back and said, no, that's what you're getting, but that there may be a bill along later which will deal with the VIRAs, widen the VIRAs of the utility regulator. What's also indicated in the department's response is that there will be a number of offshore renewable energy bills and a fracking bill all in 2025. So I wasn't expecting them just as soon as that, but that's what they're saying, and a wider ranging energy bill in 2026-27. So that's what the department says. Item 4 at page 263, utility regulators come back and again said that they would like their VIRAs to be widened in order to support decarbonisation, and that the current bill is insufficient. That's what they're saying. So if the committee therefore content to write to the department, seek clarity as to why the bill is unlikely to meet the requirements of the utility regulator.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
Yep. Okay. So items 5, okay, this is about the interconnector with Scotland. Transmission licence has been granted, but it doesn't include revenue generating provision because the department is developing a policy on interconnection. So the member, Mr. Honeyford, was asking about interconnection and storage. This is all linked. So again, committee content to write to the department just seeking again an update on the development of the interconnection policy. Then 6. Okay, so what happened was the Northern Ireland Electricity Networks raised its charges in respect of grid connections. So right now these are not socialised, and what the department is doing is developing a grid connection charging framework. So it's the committee intent to write again seeking an update on that, because we have asked before. So what they did was if you're building a new set of houses, the connection to the grid charge has gone up. In other parts of the UK, those charges are socialised, so that means everybody pays. So there's pluses and minuses to that. So is committee content just to seek an update from the department on this?
Yeah.
Can I ask members if you're content for item 7, which is about the biomethane strategy, 8, which is the post-19 SEND provision project, just to note those, if that is agreed. 9 is about apprenticeships. Basically, Work Plus suggested various things around a single apprenticeship application process and a wide register. My guess is that when the apprenticeship plan emerges shortly, maybe we'll hear more about things like this from the department. So in the meantime, we can tend to forward that to Work Plus.
Yep.
Very good. Then there's there's the next one is about SAMBITs. These are kind of a regulatory impact assessment. This came about from our briefing from FSB and Hospitality Ulster. Detail and I can tend to forward to them. Very good. Number 11 is from ADS. You can tend to forward this to ADS. So this is the Aerospace Defence Space Group. That's agreed. 12 then is, this is a DFE review of SEA regulation. So they basically regulate vocational qualifications. Timescales have not been provided, so we can tend to write to the department, just seek sight of the project plan, including the timescales and the milestones. That's great. I think this links into a wider DE review of the landscape of SEA, the landscape review of SEA. Then we have at 13 is just a copy of the letter to members are content to note to the Economic Secretary, to the Treasury, around the Consumer Council and the Financial Inclusion Committee. Really content to note. 14 is a bunch of research bulletins. They're actually pretty interesting. Our members content to note. 15, Tourism Ireland Annual Report. Are you content to note? 16, which is the Construction Industry Training Board Annual Report and Accounts. I've read it. Are you content to note? It's okay.
Take your word.
It doesn't, honestly, if there's anything to be anybody worried about or questionable, I would tell you. 17 is just the update from the department on the 9 and 12% budget increment assessments. Are you content to note those? Then at 18, the Committee for Finance is asking to see those, so we can tend to forward to them. Very good. 19, I've made a wee bit of a mess of this. This is a couple of things. This is something from the Committee for Finance, but also at page 604, we have the department's January monitoring submission. So, as the Chair had asked you earlier, I think what that shows is that there's a number of bid for resources and a reallocation of Magee Expansion Capital to further education. So they're struggling to get the money spent this year. There may be issues next year, but we're going to write about those. The chairperson sought the committee's agreement to just have a briefing from the department on how this year is going to end and to compare that with the budget for next year, if members are content with that approach. Okay. 20 then is from the, this is about the Chancellor's statements. It's from the Department of Finance. And are we content to forward this one to FSB, Hospitality Ulster and Retail NI, because they tell us about things like prompt payment and good stuff like that. Item 21 is again from the Minister of Finance, and this is her terms of reference for the new EPC research into the cost of doing business. So this is all following that the stuff that you know about. Our members content to note. Okay. Number 22 is just our regular monthly capital investment report. Is the committee content to write again to the department seeking an update of the anticipated new public procurement note on how this will include this tracking system with a view to better monitoring city and growth deal capital spending? Content. Very good. 23, okay. This is Windsor Framework Democratic Scrutiny Committee. What they've done is they've sent us their report on the EU regulations, the one that the storm outbreak has been pulled on the classification of labelling and packaging of chemicals. What's interesting in the Department for the Economy Impact Assessment at page 642 is they say quite a bit about it. They talk about the costs, the trade and the divergence impacts, but they also tell us that DWP is drafting a new explanatory memorandum, which might mean that the rest of the UK might actually adopt these EU regulations. I don't know that they will, I don't know that they won't, but is the committee content to write the DFE and just seek an update on that? What do they know? Okay, number 24, again, Windsor Framework Democratic Scrutiny Committee. This was the EU regulations on defective product liability. That committee decided that those regulations would not have a significant impact on everyday life in Northern Ireland in a way that is liable to persist. That being the case, is the committee content to note? Very good. 25 is a letter from the Speaker about the Mourne Gondola project. Committee content to note? Not opposing it. Sorry for Mr McReynolds. Then we have at 26 from Ms McLaughlin, her indication that the consultation is underway for her private members' bill. Is committee content to note? And then when that's done, the committee might wish to invite the member to talk about her bill, but probably not yet.
Probably not.
Probably not yet.
Probably not yet.
Not now, but is committee content that? Right, 27. This came to me from the Competition and Markets Authority. I'm at page 696. What this is the subsidy advice unit. Basically, whenever the City of Derry Airport is going to receive money from the local district council, 20 million quid over 4 years. They've provided us with some sort of information on that, indicating that the subsidy will be awarded through the purchase of further shares in Coda, but in a manner which is acknowledged not to be a commercial investment. Again, I think members probably have their views on this, but perhaps is the committee content just to seek clarity from Coda when we visit this afternoon?
Sounds good.
Okay, is that agreed? Yep. Very good. 28 is just from the Open University giving us their more information on the business barometer, content and notes. Yep. 29, UUEPC just came back and they can't do the work for us on public sector productivity for committee content to note. Very complicated. 30, QUB's response to the draft programme for government, committee content to note. Okay, 31 is, this is a UCAS report on level 4 and level 5 qualifications. It just says something really strange. It seems to imply that in Wales there are 320 such courses, whereas in Northern Ireland there are 10. I think that's applications through UCAS, though I'm not absolutely sure. So it's committee content that I will write to the department and just seek their commentary on that. Because there's a big shortfall. People need to be doing level 4 and level 5 courses. 10 in Northern Ireland? I can't believe that. There must be more. So, then 32, invitation to the Carers NI event, Long Gallery, Wednesday 22nd, content to note. Content. And then Ofcom at page 806, which is their event on the 23rd of January, content to note. Very good. 34, members, these are notes from Sony all about electricity grid alerts. I presume you get these yourselves. You do. Good. I will just continue to include them so you can we'll monitor the number that appears to appear. Committee are therefore content to note. Brilliant. Then we have the item 35, page 814, Northern Ireland Tourism Alliance would like to brief on their views in respect of the tourism vision and 10-year action plan. Are you content for me to arrange that briefing session? Lovely. Also, members, just for your info, the department has lately laid the annual reports and accounts for 5 of the 6 FE colleges, so Northern Regional College not included. Haven't included it this time because they're big, so I'll put them in next week if committee are content with that approach.
Great.
Very good.
Okay, item 11, forward work plan, Peter.
So, members, just to advise that Free the Night have agreed to come on the 28th of February, that the Northern Ireland Tourism Alliance on the 12th of February, and DKIT. They haven't answered us, but we're trying to get them in for, I think, about the 12th of February. But they said they would come, but they just haven't answered us over.
That's perfect. Just a wee point on that. Is that going them and ATU or one of the other? No,
it would just be DKIT because our plan is we'll come again to the Northwest and then we'd get the tertiary education group. So we would have ATU and Leo and probably UU as well to talk to the committee if the committee is content with that approach.
That works really well. Just a follow-up point. I know we've been messaging the Education Committee about that joint committee before to see if they could pull it forward. Was there any word back on that? Or?
They have not come back to me on that. I did ask them before Christmas about that.
They probably won't have met until next week.
Is there any way we can ask again so that it's top of their agenda for next week? I'm just thinking so that we can, because it's like months ago we asked. It must be about 9 months between their suggested meeting and the last one. So it's
not quite as long as that, but it is okay. Well, but I think they're waiting. You know the reasoning, but no, I can contact them again if the committee is content.
I'm thinking we asked them about it must have been September or October, and the meeting isn't until May. And that's going to be 9 months. Like it's far too long, isn't it?
Okay, members content? Is there any other business then, members? Okay, if not, then the committee will now formally adjourn and we will be back in formal session next week at 10 a.m. in our usual place of Belfast.